Okay, so hello and welcome to everyone to this Nutrient Management Board meeting of the 19th of January 2022. This meeting is being recorded and live streamed. I'm Councillor Alyssa Swinglehurst and I chair the Nutrient Management Board. There's been a number of changes, so I'm just going to try and go through those so that everyone's aware of that. So we've got a change from Sarah Faulkner to Martin Williams for the NFU. Welcome, Martin, to this meeting. I see that you're in the meeting. I saw you come in. And Dave Throop has retired and his place will be taken by Grace White for the Environment Agency. And Rachel Joy is in her first Nutrient Management Board meeting for Herefordshire Council, along with Phil Crossland. So hopefully that's clear. I'd like at this point as well to take a moment to propose a vote of thanks for Nick Reed, who has stepped down from his role at Farm Herefordshire. Obviously, he worked for many years, both as lead for Farm Herefordshire and on the board, specifically looking at agricultural diffuse pollution. So I would just like to record the board's thanks for his time and his efforts on that on behalf of the board. This meeting, the chat's been left on. I'd be grateful if people in the meeting use it as a way of asking questions. It's a really good tool for that, and try to avoid using it as a running commentary if possible. This is a long meeting, as it always is, with a packed and exciting agenda, as it always is. Please be prepared, it may run over, because it usually does. But if people could sort of bear that in mind, I'll do my best to kind of crack on through the agenda, but there's always a lot to get through. I'm not planning to take a break unless there's a specific request to do so, because I'm assuming you can all just take your cameras off and do whatever you need to do when you need to do it. When you come to speak, please, if you could introduce yourself, that would be fantastic. The voting by those members present with voting rights will be by assumed assent. So if you have a disagreement with the proposal, please speak up and record that dissent. But I'm going to forewarn everyone that it is my intention to make the vote on item 7, which is the water protection zone proposal, that will be done in the more formal for, against and abstain way, so that there's complete clarity around that. I have apologies only from Andrew Osbalderson, but he has sent a short report, which I will read into the meeting at item 9, regarding citizen science and other things that he's involved with. Are there any other apologies that anyone's aware of?
Yes, Chair. Anne Weedy for NRW won't be in attendance today.
Okay, thanks, David.
It's just me, David Lee. Thank you.
Thanks, David. Thank you. And any others?
Councillor Swinglehurst, Kevin Singleton is absent as well.
All right, thanks, Sam. Right, so we'll go on with the minutes of the last board meeting. Are there any matters of accuracy to report in respect of those minutes? Okay, then I'll take it that the board is happy to approve those minutes. Thank you. Matters arising. I picked up on one or two things which I did email out, so hopefully everyone's prepared for it. There were Claire Minette was going to make a report back for the reasons for the discrepancy at the Redbrook testing on both sides. I don't know whether she's got any further information on that. And also there was a question from Helen Hamilton regarding the risk impact zones not showing on the magic maps, which Claire Minette was going to field subsequent to that meeting. Claire, have you got any updates on either of those?
Yes, yeah, updates on both of those. So EA and NRW, Lucy Tristan, have looked into the discrepancy at Redbrook, and their analysis concluded it's to do with the different samples collected on different days and different times. So to resolve it, they're going to pool resources. So what they need to do is join those sampling points together to come up with an overall which would be more accurate, because it'll have more sampling data. So there wasn't anything intrinsically different about the way they were monitoring. It was the different places and different times they were doing it. So obviously now, I think I covered this because Dave Throop wasn't at the last meeting, but Anne or David and could pick up with EA and NRW if you want a further update on that, but that was the reason for that discrepancy. Regarding Magic and the IRZ, the short answer is IRZs are on Magic. So there is a layer, the SSS IRZ layer on Magic, and you can use it as a downloadable data set as well. So it's it comes out as a summary, performs exactly the same function as our internal IRZ. So for those who aren't familiar with impact risk zones, they're published in 2014 by Natural England, and so it's a tool that planning authorities use to determine whether they need to consult Natural England on developments. So anyone can go onto Magic, click at any point, and if you look at the IRZ layer, it will tell you whether that's within an IRZ, and so that indicates whether you should be consulting with Natural England, because even though you might not be in the SSSI, you're in an area that could impact that SSSI. So hopefully that's helpful.
Yeah, thank you. Helen, Stace, you want to respond to that?
Yeah, I just wondered if anything is being done about reviewing the impact risk zones, because they don't take account of the tributaries. They are just literally contours around the main stem of the river, and so they completely ignore the connectivity of the tributaries. And I don't feel that really does represent an adequate consultation zone for development. Okay,
yeah, point taken, and very much understood. So there's a couple of areas around that that Natural England are looking at, certainly in terms of HRAs rather than just SSSIs. There's a whole functionally linked land, and you're right, the tributaries and especially the headwaters of those tributaries are absolutely critical for the overall health and catchment of the river in terms of restoring that functionality of rivers that we're all striving to. So you're right, at the moment they don't. Whether that's been looked at in the future is something I can take away and ask, but very much recognise, very much recognise where that question is coming from.
Okay, Helen's just put something in the chat about also those zones have outlines about the types of development that should be consulted with each of those, and we have worries about that not being adequate as well. Yeah, okay, I think I did provide Helen with an email response about that. So they do cover all types of development, so they're not restricted to specific development, so they're a trigger for the local authority to consult Natural England. So they do cover any kind of development. But not the manure management. That's probably a level of detail that's too complex for this call. But a building, that was evidenced to produce more manure management, that would have to be looked at as part of the HRA, and we would expect that to be looked at as part of the HRA. But IRZs do cover all developments and all impacts on our SSSIs.
Okay, I think, I mean, given the complexity of this, we don't want to disappear down a rabbit hole just on the matters arising.
So we've only just got started.
It's like, oh, crikey. So it is, just let everyone know, it is in my mind to kind of get this, into a meeting, or next meeting, or the meeting after that, as an item that we can kind of properly chat about over time, and maybe look at it in conjunction with manure management plans. Might be sensible. So I mean, maybe we can liaise over that and just see what's the best way of framing that, and to get that, whether to kind of couple them up or not.
But I think a discussion certainly around a detailed discussion around manure management and our
okay,
useful.
Fabulous. Okay, so there was also an outstanding question about the implications of widespread chemical failure. That was Dave Throop was going to answer, but obviously Dave Throop isn't here anymore. So that's passed to Grace White. Is Grace, you on the call?
Yeah. So afternoon, everyone. I'm Grace White.
Hey, Grace.
Say hello. Unfortunately, I don't have an answer to that one, so I'll get back to you. on that.
Okay, that's understood since you have only recently taken over, but if you could pick it up and come up with something later, that'd be fantastic. And the other thing was there was a question that was asked of Nigel Berry about the destination of washout water. Now we can't keep chasing gamblers for a response because it's not their job to respond to the Nutrient Management Board. But the Environment Agency, I feel, should be able to provide something of an audit trail for washout water and what treatment and so forth it undergoes to give us reassurance that it is not discharged complete with a chemical cocktail into the river. Grace, is that something that you'll be able to provide?
I'll work with Jenny after this and do our best to get that information. And I think I've also seen from something in the chat from Helen about what chemicals are in the washout water as well. I don't know if I'm going to be able to provide that, but I'll do my best to get the information if we've got it.
That would be great. Thank you. Brilliant. Tom Tibbets.
Thank you, Chair. Just in the matters arising, unfortunately, I wasn't at the last meeting because I wasn't invited, although I think that my name is now permanently on the invitation list. DL confirmed a response had been made to the question of TT. Could that response be repeated for my benefit, please?
Where was that, Tom? Sorry.
In the matters arising in the notes of the board meeting on the 27th of September, page 2, top of page 2, paragraph 2, number 3, Dave.
Okay. I can't remember what that was about, Tom. Can I come back to you separately, Tom? Do you
Yes,
mind?
that'd be fine. I look forward to your
Okay.
response.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, so also in the last meeting, we had some great news from Avara about steps that they're proposing to take. And that set me to thinking about what the other sources are within the catchment. And I'm acutely aware that we are not, or I'm certainly not sufficiently aware of whether or not there is whether biosolids in various forms are coming into the catchment, being retained in the catchment or spread within the catchment, either from Dir Cymru or Severn Trent. Is that something, Fergus, you could go away and find out and let us know? Because it's no good us reducing the sources from poultry manure if there is still a source from biosolids. Kate.
Yes, certainly you can do that if you want me to take that action away.
Super duper. Thank you. That'd be lovely.
Okay.
Thanks. Kate, speak Adams.
Hi. Yeah, Fergus, I have had meetings with your biosolids team and they've given figures of 23,000 tonnes spread in the Y, and I've now got a request in with the Severn Trent team that we work with to get figures of any biosolids that they are spreading.
Okay, I might like a report on that. Can you share the data to the board as and when that gets, clarified?
Yes, certainly.
Yeah, that'd be fabulous. Thank you very much. There was also an outstanding item for Paul Cottington to share the presentation from the May board meeting about the works in the Axe catchment. That was for an NFU thing. I don't know if that's even possible to pick up now, but I just thought I'd mention it. Now, the other thing that we spoke about on the last agenda was to try to get some degree of confidence about the numbers of chickens in the catchment. Obviously, there's a lot of work being done on this. Councillor McIntosh was going to try to get some numbers from Paris. I don't know if is Councillor McIntosh on the call. Maybe not.
He's not chair. He's actually stood down as portfolio holder. So
can I leave that with you as a sort of?
Yeah, just a quickie, I could say in terms of statistics, there are small area statistics out there produced by Welsh Government that include animal numbers, and I think they go up to 2020, so different types of animals. So there is an official source out there as well. What won't be there is how that maps against each individual catchment, I suspect. So there have to be a follow-up there, but there is an official source there.
Okay, because it seems to me we're very blessed to have this kind of fantastic voluntary effort being undertaken by remarkable people, CPR and the like, who are doing great work in cross-referencing and trying to mine out these numbers going back historically. Now, I'm going to ask that we have an undertaking from all the relevant board members, who'd be the local planning authorities and statutory agencies, to cooperate with these volunteers, and specifically CPRW and other voluntary groups, as they're trying to kind of, join the dots and assemble this information. And I think it will be an enormous benefit to us anyway. We need to know all this stuff, but also considering the recommendation from the Environment Audit Committee regarding catchment-wide nutrient budgeting, 5-yearly nutrient flow analysis and nutrient neutrality, that in a sense we've got to start benchmarking this as accurately as possible and triangulate the various strands of knowledge so that we really have a very clear idea. So if I can please ask all relevant board members to be very proactive and positive, and that would be please. And just for those who are unaware of the report on rivers by the Environment Audit Committee that's been recently published, so I'm just going to quote from their introduction. Each catchment should have a nutrient budget calculated. Pollution from all sources in the catchment must then be progressively reduced or mitigated until it does not exceed the capacity of the river to handle the nutrients. New poultry farms should not be granted planning permission in catchments exceeding their nutrient budgets. And this is and that makes it through to the final recommendations of that committee, along with a number of other recommendations. But a lot of it is about understanding the nutrient balance within the catchment. So the more we know, the better place we'll be to action that should it come forward. But we should be doing it anyway, in my opinion. David Lee.
Thanks, Chair. Just to go back to the livestock numbers, we've put a request in through to AFA, Animal Plant Health Authority, for livestock numbers across the Y, and then we're looking to map it onto our system, so we'll be able to identify hotspots around dairy cows or pigs or poultry in the Y catchment, which will help us then understand. I've seen a draft version of previous year data, and it just says for pigs, for instance, 51 plus number of pigs, which isn't a lot of use to us. So we'd have to sort of ground truth that when we have these identified hotspots. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, David. Mary Albright. Mary?
Yeah, thanks, Alyssa. Just to reiterate what David was saying, that we need to cover all the animals, not just poultry, because there will be other animals impacting. But the local authority need these numbers because they can't apply a cumulative impact assessment if they don't know the numbers and where they're located. But also those numbers then come with a corresponding waste management plan, which again, the local authority need to be attaching and cross-referencing with each other. So it's not kind of an ephemeral number. We do need the number for people to be able to do their jobs. And it just occurred to me that we've obviously been using the 20 million for the last meeting, and kind of in other documents I've seen the 20 million. And if Avara haven't disputed that number, I would presume that it's okay to use it, but I think we do need to be a bit more certain. And Avara do say they process 1.85 million birds in Hereford a week. So they probably do know if we've got our numbers wrong. So maybe that's some reassurance that they haven't queried the 20 million. But also, I think we need to record thanks to the volunteers that did the work, because I don't know if you've ever tried to drill down and ascertain what's happened, but it's virtually impossible for the last couple of years, let alone the last 20 years. So to Alison and Christine and all those guys, I say thank you very much, but I think it's time for other people to take that data now and formalise it and use it in their decision-making process. It wouldn't be fair to assume that citizens can keep on top of this work when it's a huge task. So thank you, but I think it's time for other people to take ownership of the numbers as well, if possible.
Yeah, completely agree. James Marsden.
Good afternoon, Alyssa, and good afternoon, everybody. I want to reiterate a point I've made before. We mustn't lose sight of the big picture. We've had a good chat now about livestock numbers in relation to phosphate. Very briefly, Alyssa, with your indulgence, let me turn to greenhouse gas emissions in relation to livestock numbers. POIS, 66% of greenhouse gas emissions in POIS are from agriculture, mostly methane and nitrous oxide. In the Brecon Beacons National Park, 48% of total greenhouse gas emissions from agriculture, from livestock. In Herefordshire, 22% of total greenhouse gas emissions are from agriculture. Join the dots. You have to go to a significant livestock reduction if we're serious about climate, if we're serious about phosphate and the manure load from the livestock and nature recovery. Join it up.
Okay, thanks, James. Yeah, I don't think we're only contained by the fact that we are the Nutrient Management Board as opposed to the Climate Change Management Board. But
yes, sorry, I sit on that too.
Completely take your point there. David Lee.
I think I've left my hand up.
You've got a legacy hand up, have you? Oh, right, right, okay, so that's so can I take it that I do have those relevant members of the board will work positively with our volunteer amazing people to try to mine that information and get that. Is that okay with everyone? Brilliant, thank you. Okay, so I'm hoping now we have Harry Cowan on the call from Power and Water, who's going to tell us a little bit about pyrolysis as a potential treatment for poultry manure.
Afternoon, all.
Hello, Harry. Hi, nice to see you.
Hi.
So I will simply pass over to you, and so you can tell us a bit about your.
Yeah, I've kind of broadened the scope a wee bit, Alyssa, without permission. So I beg forgiveness rather than permission. So what I wanted to do, I've put together just a very short series of slides. I just want to give a sort of recap, which I can share with you and leave behind if you're interested, which just plots the journey that we've made for Power and Water, and in particular in the Wye and Usk. So if I switch to that, the history of my involvement is quite interesting, actually. It started in a Burns night in Langarden in 2020 when I sat beside Andrew McRobb, who introduced me to Alyssa, who then visited Power and Water in Swansea, and that kind of started the ball rolling. So I've been engaged to a greater or lesser extent since January 2020. So let me try and share this screen. It won't take long. It's going to flick through it really quickly, but hopefully it'll give us some sort of factoids to hold on to, and then we can have a Q&A session after that. So fingers crossed. Here we go. Try and find it. There we are. Can you see that?
Yep, that's great, Harry.
Great. Okay, so let me quickly flick through. As I say, it's not going to be a particularly in-depth or lengthy presentation, but it just gave me a framework to describe where we're coming from. I've got some points of view on it, as you would expect, and leave with a statement about what we think the next steps should be in terms of the broader issue, as opposed to where Power and Water sit in it. So he said, let's try and get this going. Just switch across to that screen. Okay, so Power and Water are a Swansea-based company. We are the proprietors of a patented non-liquid chemical solution for wastewater treatment in the main. It was invented by a very bright Welshman based in Swansea. We've been going here down in Swansea for about 8 years now. But we have a mission now about the environment and what contribution we can make to it. So I'm just going to summarize it as we want to make it affordable, sustainable, environmentally positive. Initially, it was with wastewater treatment, but we've kind of broadened that out a wee bit, but for the reasons that I described earlier. We really are to drop to the vernacular. We're the antichrist of toxic liquid chemicals, and we're engaging in various theatres of industry in actually achieving some foothold in that regard. We've latterly, since we had this early conversation with Alyssa and various others, and met Simon Evans and various others from the YNUSC, and initially we broadened our view to say, look, there's probably a bigger area here that we can make a contribution to. So what we've been doing is using our resources to combine our technology with, as Alyssa said, purveyors of carbonisation pyrolysis technology, because we are involved in aquaculture, municipal waste management, in industry, construction, and the recurring theme there is, what do we do about waste management? It is an ever-increasing problem, and we believe that there is a way forward, which I just want to very quickly address, and then we can have a conversation about it. It's kind of like stating the obvious. I'll leave it with you, but we did a bit of analysis, and this has actually been just emphasised by everyone who's been speaking beforehand. We know there's a big issue. We know where it lies. We know that there are several contributory factors. That is agriculture, untreated sewage, and some ancillary stuff. We have done some work in the agriculture space for with a company, farm down in Wales called Coleg Sargar, looking at slurry treatment. We've had several conversations, one with John Reid at Avara, in talking about how we could make a contribution to the handling the poultry waste and the nutrient pollution that comes from that. So I don't need to tell you anything that isn't on this slide and you haven't talked about before. So I'll just pass on very quickly. So what's different about us? Well, we don't use liquid chemicals. We use something called electrocoagulation. It's patented pretty well worldwide, and it's pretty well the same effect as liquid chemical dosing, but we don't have any of the environmental problems, health and safety, or the use of acid-based chemicals to actually do the treatment. So that's how we do it. Our system, in fact, I think you come down and seen it, Alyssa, it's very, very portable, skid mounted, and scalable to a large extent. We generate chemicals, but we don't use the acid-based solutions that are commonplace in the industry. And that is our big point. We can do what we need to do, but without all the ancillary issues of using acid-based chemicals. So we're big fans of the circular economy. I mentioned briefly, we have quite a presence in the aquaculture industry, fish farming in Norway and in Anglesey. And we're looking at what do we do there. We take solids out of the wastewater that the recirculating aquaculture systems use, but it still leaves a problem. What do you do with all this, the slurry and the sludge? I'm visiting Scotland next week to visit a couple of farms up there. There is one fish farm who currently has to transport 6 28-ton tankers a week from the west coast of Scotland to the east coast to dispose of the slurry, and they're about to build another plant. We're talking to them about some advanced solutions, some of this which I'm going to allude to as we go through here. So this isn't a theoretical discussion. This is actually about how do we get into waste to energy, safe wastewater treatment, waste to energy, and waste management. And those are the challenges. They're very obvious. How do you dispose of what you've got within the sustainability, the guidelines, the CO2 emissions, and the costs that are associated? I don't exactly know from memory what it costs to put 6 28-ton tankers from West Scotland to the East Coast, but it must be a lot of money, they say. So we're trying to do our wee bit, and it's a wee bit because we're a small company, into the circular economy, the ecology footprint, and how do we make best use of what we've got currently. We're trying to make best use of something which is currently a problem. We have done a lot of work in terms of combining wastewater treatment, waste to energy management, and we're partnering with a German company who have a carbonisation product which has been running for 10 years now. So we've got a track record, and we're able to address with them. They're a very impressive partner, and we've been engaging with them and building a partnership. So we can bring tangible solutions to the table. It's not just one of these theoretical, why don't we do this? There is actually it's a real solution that's there, and evidence and reference accounts that we could go to and see. We just need to grasp the nettle here, is my challenge. So what we've done so far, we have tried to engage with Dwyer Cymru. Despite the fact that we're a Welsh company, it's been a struggle. There's been a real barrier to embracing the sort of technology that we're offering to them. I can't really tell you why, but there we go. That's the fact of the matter. We did actually, through another contact who's not on the call today, there was an opportunity offered up for external funding to try and upgrade some of the 3 catchments that are blocking house building schemes in Herefordshire. But there wasn't any real positive uptake there. I'm not going to pull any punches here. It's a source of great frustration for me. We've tried very hard, but we're not really getting the traction. If there's anyone on the call who can help that, please do get in touch. I'll embrace that opportunity with great enthusiasm. Talked about the waste to energy partner with practical application. We've also engaged with the Biochar Research Centre at Edinburgh University. We're getting great traction with them and a great deal of knowledge about biochar, its characteristics, and what the influencing factors are there. We've got an environmental consultant we're dealing with who's connecting into the house building community. And we've engaged with a major industrial producer in the poultry industry, whom you know and has been mentioned already in the conversation that's gone before. Very quickly, and by the way, I can take any questions. I'm happy to meet online, offline, and go into much more detail because I'm just doing a sort of, a helicopter view of what I think that was appropriate for this meeting. So what we've done so far, I'd like to capitalise in some way on what they've done so far. We've been working on this just as a little company, trying to plough a lone furrow there. And I think we need to move to a pilot exercise which can demonstrate what I've been floating as a proposition. We can demonstrate Suneco, which is a branded product name for the wastewater treatment, to Welsh Water and the poultry industry, because the wastewater, it has to be treated, and to also evaluate and prove the value of carbonisation as efficient and effective and viable waste to energy solution for the disposal of poultry manure, which I know is not just the only issue, but I mentioned previously we're doing some work in the agriculture industry as well, not just poultry but other animals as well. What I'd like to do as well, if we can, is to secure active support from interested parties, and Alyssa and others on the call can probably tell me who those interested parties are. I have a view, but I'm sure it's greater than the view I've got. I'd like them to really step up, say, let's engage in pilot schemes. We have probably taken this as a small company as far as we can. So I would like to throw out a challenge which says, can we collectively get some funding together, which would implement a demonstrable plant that in a very short space of time can overcome the objections, which are pretty well still theoretical and historical. And I know that we can rent or buy a pilot carbonisation plant. I know we can implement a Suneco system, could roll a skid up to anywhere within the Welsh Water or Severn Trent area next week and start it running. We've got systems going into Welsh Water, into Yorkshire Water and Northumbrian Water. So they're beginning to embrace it. But I just want to talk about the local situation where we don't really have we haven't managed to get any real traction with either Severn Trent or Welsh Water, but there we go. And we'd like to also formally engage the Edinburgh Biochar Research Centre, and maybe the Hampstead Institute, close to where I live in Hertfordshire, to look at how we can start analysing and evaluating the issues surrounding biochar as a co-product and the use of the energy that can be generated either as heat, where you can generate electricity, you can generate gas. There is a myriad of solutions available if we just bring these technologies together. And that's kind of all I really want to say formally, and invite you to query my proposition, if you will. But repeat, if you need further in-depth discussion, one, you're very welcome to visit us in Swansea, which Alyssa has done, a couple of others have done, or we'll engage in Zoom calls or sharing data. We've got loads of data about what we can do. I mean, our phosphorus removal technology will reduce phosphorus levels by 95% in the wastewater stream, proven, tested in our labs. And I kind of, if you've detected some frustration in me, it's because I can't really understand why we're not getting there. But look, I'll leave it open now. That's all I've got to take up in terms of formality here. And I'd love to hear from you and see if there's any what reactions you would wish to share with me. Is that all right, Alyssa?
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Harry. And I'm just going to say here and now, because we are quite pushed for time, I'm going to be quite cautious about the amount of questions that I allow after everything. And specifically, obviously, we've got board members here and voting board members, but we have members of the public. Tom Tibbetts, you're a member of the public. Sure. You're a wonderful one, but nevertheless, so I'm going to try and just make that judgment where it's necessary. So if everyone understands that would be cool. So Fergus, let's hear from Joe Cymru.
Thank you. So I'm the environmental services manager for Joe Cymru, Harry. Just to respond on your comments, we have trialed electrocoagulation on a number of occasions. It hasn't worked very well for us. That's why we're not using it. You did get in touch with us recently. We said, look, if you've got a variation, alteration, or something that you think will work better, there is a route by which we can bring this in, but we will trial it. It's through our innovation platform. But we haven't heard back from you on that. So we did sort of respond to you on that. And that was it, really. That's all I wanted to say.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Fergus. Okay, thanks. Yeah, I mean, I think, Harry, just a general thing that there are concerns around both the, or clearly electrical, but and also the pyrolysis with historical issues with other versions of it. So I think at some point that would be something that you'd have to explain in some detail as to why the proposal that you have is not going to fall foul of those historical issues, and where the kind of peer-reviewed evidence is that of efficacy and so on and so forth. And I think that's. But for today, this is an overall introduction, and not intended to be the last word on all the detail here. And also, just for those who are maybe unclear about how all this works, and certainly this is my understanding. So correct me if I'm wrong. The Sonico, it would be potentially a way of, for instance, taking the phosphates out of digestate. So it could work alongside another technology to do that, whereas the pyrolysis with biochar is a separate technology again for removal and processing of poultry manure, resulting in biochar. Is that correct?
I mean, we've found over the years, I've been down here for a couple of years now, so the Pear and Water have been around a bit longer than me, but there is no magic bullet here. There's no one single solution. What we've realized is that the solution inevitably requires the combination of different technologies, and that's what we've been doing. And to go back to Fergus, I'll connect with you separately, Fergus, rather than have a debate on this channel, because things have moved forward enormously in the last 12 months. But there we go. So maybe if we can have a separate conversation. I don't have your contact details, but I'd love to meet up with you and invite you down here to see what we're doing. But so you're right, Alyssa. What we've discovered is there is no one single pill that can solve the problem, and we've been researching that for the last couple of years. So your summary was spot on.
Okay, thank you. Rachel Joy.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think your point, Harry, about the circular economy is absolutely essential and vital to this. The Elsa and Haygarth work on phosphorus past and future identify that biochar is only 47% available, the phosphate in it, and therefore without other regenerative farming measures alongside this, it wouldn't be a direct like-for-like input. But as part of a circular approach, it would probably be helpful.
Absolutely. In fact, recently, my head of process design gave me some stats earlier. I know what the source was. I can find out, which says that in a recent survey, I think it was in England only, there is probably 10 years of phosphorus content in soil already that don't need any replenishment, actually. So I'm not actually peddling biochar as the solution to the phosphorus issue. It's actually saying there's something you can do to solve the problem, but still have something that's usable after it. So that kind of pragmatic solution rather than a magic bullet again.
Okay, thank you. Kate Speak Adams.
Hi, Harry. Nice to see you again. We've got lots of different farmers that are obviously interested in trialing things, and I'm sure people are approaching yourselves or any other companies. What would be useful is whether you could give that pitch to me in a one-sided document with a potential cost, so that I can start taking that to those farmers and getting these pilots up and running, because like you say, we just need to start trying this stuff on the ground and understanding the impacts and the benefits. So I'm more than happy to try and do that if you can provide that overview.
I'll connect with you separately on that, Kate. That'd be a great opportunity. And to be honest, I think that's the only way you can come to earth on these things. You know, we could talk about it forever, but you got to trial it and try it, you know, so I couldn't agree more.
Good, that's really positive. Phil Crossland. Having trouble unmuting. Right, Tom Tibbetts. We'll come back to you, Phil. Oh, no, he's back. He's back. He's with us.
It was just really quickly on the biochar thing. I had one of my other things that I've been looking at is ash dieback, and I am aware that there is some research that suggests biochar, soil drilling and putting biochar around the base of ash trees can help reduce ash dieback. It's been brought to my attention. I've not looked at it in detail, but I know using it when planting new ash trees as well can help to prevent them from suffering the same fate. So it may be that there is a circular economy thing there to try and address what will be a massive nature impact across the UK.
Yeah.
Interesting. And Tom Tibbetts.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Harry, for your presentation. For your information, Harry, I am the chair of a volunteer organisation called Friends of the Upper Wye, who are undertaking citizen science monitoring of watercourses. I just have a few questions, and I may, it's quite possible that you won't be able to answer them all here, but I'm curious about two aspects of your technology. Firstly, the Sonico for slurry and liquid waste remediation. Can you comment on the fresh water consumption and energy consumption of your units per tonne of waste process? And then when we come onto the pyrolysis, the German partner you're working with, I would be fascinated to learn much more about the reliability and where there are working examples of those units to be seen working with corrosive materials such as poultry manure. And I also have a question for you, which is what do you do with the arising phosphate-containing sludge or waste products from these processes? How do we ensure that these don't go back into the environment in an inappropriate way and end up in the river? And I have a planning question, and this is open for the entire meeting. Are there planning issues or questions around increase in HGV movements around farms where such remediation solutions might be imposed or required to reduce pollution? And would the increase of those, or would any increase of HGV movements or anything, therefore, basically, were that to be considered right at the beginning of the scheme, would it have been granted planning with that level of vehicle movements?
Okay, I probably can't remember them all, but I'll try from the top. Initially, we don't use water at all. We simply take wastewater in. We don't have to add anything to it. And we've recently developed our product to a new generation, which has reduced the, by the way, the per consumption is a calculation based on the amount of water you got to treat, as you would imagine. But we can easily sort of sit down and model that with anyone who's interested. But we've enhanced our product during the last 18 months, whereby we've reduced the power demand of the process by up to 50%. So we're very conscious of and as in various ways, I wouldn't bother with the technology, but we've actually managed to do that, which I think is a big plus. We don't use any additional water, and therefore we deliver, in the main, we're in the phosphorus removal space, so we deliver treated water back to in wastewater treatment works, we deliver it back to the system, and therefore it follows out through into the watercourses within the municipal space. So that's, we don't use water, we reduce power. The subject of, sort of tankerage and so on. We're addressing that with our clients in Scotland. Actually, they're worried about the 6 28-ton tankers that are travelling from Oban to Kinloch, even on the East Coast. There is a massive issue there, and when we to the point that we do it at the moment, when we produce the sludge from the wastewater treatment, we stop there, and that's what's been frustrating me, because actually we realise that all we do is a bit of it. We're not really solving the problem, which is what really took us into this area about how do we use the waste to management proposition that can close the loop. So we've been a bit, historically, a wee bit insular in saying, well, we've done our bit because the water's clean now, but we're ignoring almost a bit like the AD issue and the digestate and the wastewater treatment, phosphorus removal and the sludge, which is really was the motivation for us to get involved in the wider picture, Tom, to be quite honest.
Okay, so
an example of where you can see the pyrolysis in action was the other part of Tom's question.
Yes. So with our German partner, they've got systems that have been running constantly for 10 years. They have multiple installations in Europe, and I have an open invitation to visit one of their plants, which is close to Frankfurt Airport, to see it in action. So that's the sort of thing I would ask as well, so the question is absolutely appropriate.
Right, and I'm going to draw a line now due to time limits. Thank you very much, Harry, for coming and giving your presentation. As everyone present on the call will know, that Harry said he's happy to answer any questions or pick up any further inquiries. So if you want further detail, please contact them directly.
Please do. Yeah, and there's an open invitation. You want to come and visit us in Swansea, please pop down. We do information days regularly. We can talk through the whole process either singly or as a group. You're very welcome, and we'd really sort of be happy and very positive about that.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Thank you for your time. It's much appreciated.
I shall leave the meeting now. Great to meet you all virtually. Some I've met before. By the way, again, Alyssa has my contact details. If anyone wants to contact me, I'm open to it and would welcome. Okay.
Thanks a lot. Cheerio. Thank you.
Bye.
So right now we have a presentation from Sue Buckingham to inform us about, or give us a kind of a starter information about ammonia and nitrogen deposition within the catchment. And Sue very kindly, this was a longer presentation, but due to the amount of stuff to get through on the agenda, she shortened it. But it's a subject to which I feel we may be returning. So this is an introduction. So thank you. Sue, over to you.
Thank you for inviting me today to the Nutrient Management Plan Board to talk about nitrogen and ammonia losses from agriculture. I'm Sue Buckingham, and I'm currently the lead catchment sensitive farming advisor for air quality in the West Midlands. And I'm sure most of you know, but for those of you who don't know, catchment sensitive farming is led by Natural England in partnership with DEFRA and the Environment Agency to help farmers and landowners take voluntary measures to improve both air and water quality. And we have catchment sensitive farmers working on the ground all over the West Midlands to help farmers take, and we provide one-to-one advice, specialist support and training, and also endorsement for capital grant items that improve and benefit water quality through the Countryside Stewardship Grant Scheme. So today is just a snapshot. I'm going to give you a quick taste. There's very little technical information in it. And I'm sure there's a lot of ecologists on the call who know an awful lot more about nitrogen and ammonia emission and the effects than me. But I think what I'd like you to do while I'm talking is try and reflect on how this mirrors some of the actions that have been identified for the Nutrient Management Plan Board, and whether ammonia and nitrogen deposition from agriculture could be built in to the nutrient management plan in the long term, particularly with a view to avoiding pollution swapping, because there's always a danger of, in trying to sort the phosphate issue out, potentially creating other issues. So here goes, really. So internationally, poor air quality as a result of industrialization is the greatest cause of early death. It contributes to high levels of coronary heart disease and respiratory problems, and it costs economies billions of pounds. So the first driver to improve air quality was human health, but increasingly it's become understood that nitrogen and ammonia emissions from agriculture are creating significant damage to natural and semi-natural habitats and their associated biodiversity. And recent evidence suggests that nitrogen and ammonia emissions from agriculture are actually a more pressing issue in terms of loss of biodiversity than climate change. So that's a big, changes the perspective really on nitrogen and ammonia loss. Many years ago, the UK signed up to an international treaty to improve air quality called the Gothenburg Protocol. And as a result of that, it studied the sources of emissions and looked at the mitigation measures and set targets for all industrial processes, from transport to industrial production to even down to household wood burning stoves. And you'll be aware that the industries, that there is a drive to clean up wood burning stoves. And so it looked at possible mitigation measures and it set targets for emission reductions. And the target for ammonia is to reduce emissions of ammonia compared to the 2005 baseline by 16%. And as part of the modelling, the mitigation measures were considered and the levels of uptake that would be required to get that, to reach that target. And it's seen that the mitigation techniques are available and that there'll be funding and support to reach that level of emission reduction. And we know that there's countries in Europe that have already started on this process, where they've actually achieved emission reductions of 50% in nitrogen and ammonia emissions, albeit from a much higher baseline than here in the UK. So for those of you who aren't involved in perhaps the farming sector, nitrogen is a vital nutrient for all living things, and it's the first limiting nutrient for plant and animal growth. But not in nature, before industrialization, there are actually very small amounts of nitrogen available for plant and animal growth. So most of our natural and semi-natural habitats and the associated biodiversity actually thrive on low nitrogen environments. They're nitrogen phobic. And it was only the invention of nitrogen fertilizer after the Second World War that led to increases in agricultural productivity and food security, that led to increases in nitrogen and ammonia in the atmosphere. And unfortunately, as with many biological systems, livestock agriculture is very inefficient in terms of nitrogen use efficiency. So ruminant livestock probably only use nitrogen at about a 25% efficiency level. Poultry and pigs, possibly 40 to 60% nitrogen use efficiency. And then on the spreading of manures and fertilizers, again, low nitrogen use efficiencies. You're looking at nitrogen fertilizer possibly being used at about 50% nitrogen use efficiency, and slurries and manures at a much lower level than that. So you can see that there's an awful lot of nitrogen leaving the agriculture sector, and it enters the air or the water environment. And it's the air environment that we're looking at today. And when it enters the air environment, it tends to be, the majority tends to be as ammonia. There are some nitrogen oxides of nitrogen as well, but in terms of the improving air quality, we're specifically looking at ammonia because that's where we'll get the greatest impact. And when it leaves as ammonia, what you find is that some of it is deposited very locally as dry deposition, and that can cause acute and immediate effects on habitats. But other ammonia combines with other pollutants in the air and can travel long distances, either nationally or internationally, before it's deposited. So it's a big issue. If you think back to, well, at my age, I can think back to the acid rain problems and the trees dying in Norway and Sweden. And most of that, a lot of that problem of acid rain is actually sulfur dioxide from the UK that was being carried by the wind across the ocean. So it just shows that, you know, we can have a local issue in terms of the creation and some of the deposition of ammonia, but actually we also receive nitrogen ammonia internationally, and we send it off to other places. So it's not a straightforward issue to solve. But ecologists and researchers have identified critical levels of ammonia above which you start to get habitat damage. And they've also identified critical loads of nitrogen above which you get habitat damage. And they've mapped the critical loads and the critical levels. So I'll just give you a brief overview of the UK information on that. So this map shows the nitrogen critical loads that have been mapped for the UK. What it shows is the blue areas are where the nitrogen critical load, so the deposition of nitrogen, hasn't been exceeded for habitats. And then the legend uses a traffic light system. So it goes green, yellow, red, and then black is the highest level of critical load. And what you can see is Herefordshire is speckled red, which indicates that the nitrogen deposition is 7 to 14 kilograms per hectare exceedance of nitrogen. And about 90%, over 90% of the SSSIs and SACs are receiving more nitrogen than they can cope with. And when you think that 25% of the ammonia is deposited locally, and you then start thinking about the types of livestock agriculture we have, it starts to translate into a picture that farming is contributing significantly, potentially, to this issue in Herefordshire. The pictures at the bottom right of the slide just give a visual idea of the type of damage that ammonia can cause. So on healthy trees, you get good algal growth, good lichen growth. And in fact, lichen growth and studying lichens gives a very good indication of the ammonia deposition in an area. And then you can also see on the right-hand side the fact that there is, the type of damage that it causes, and the fact that the lichens get replaced by algal growth. And so, significant impact of deposition on species. The next slide shows the ammonia concentrations in the UK, uses a similar legend. And we know that lower plants, which are lichens and bryophytes, are potentially damaged by ammonia concentrations greater than 1 microgram per meter cubed. And higher plants are damaged by ammonia concentrations greater than 3. And again, if we look at Herefordshire, the whole of Herefordshire exceeds the 3 micrograms per cubic meter. And within that, we've got small areas where we've got exceedance levels that will affect lichens and bryophytes. So I think it comes back to what somebody was saying earlier. We need to understand nutrient balances. And that came out of the EFRA report. And as part of that, we have a picture of the UK ammonia emissions. And it's worth sharing this. I think it just gives you the idea of where the sources are from a UK perspective. And it basically shows that beef and dairy cattle are contributing almost 50% of the emissions. And then fertilizer application, a further 23%, with poultry, pigs and sheep just over a quarter. And poultry is only 15%. But this is a national inventory. And the question is, what is the picture in Herefordshire? Because Herefordshire agriculture doesn't necessarily mirror a typical agricultural picture nationally. We know we've got more poultry farms in many areas. We know we've got less dairy farms than many areas. We know we grow more potatoes than many areas. So there's a question mark over how closely our emissions from sectors would mirror those in the UK inventory. And then on the right-hand side, it's looking at the same figures in a different way, and it's highlighting the issues with fertilizer and manure applications in terms of loss of ammonia, and again, there's about 50% coming from fertilizers and manures. Livestock housing is contributing just over a quarter, And then the remaining quarter is coming from things like manure storage, grazing, and hard standings. So you'll see that the same, I suppose, processes or systems that are leading to the phosphorus problems in the Y are potentially delivering issues with nitrogen and ammonia in terms of habitat. And I think what we need to do, what we've looked at in Natural England is, where do we go from here? We've got this information, and we know that as part of the government's 25-year plan, that we need to get 75% of our protected sites into good condition. So what the West Midlands team has decided to do is to actually start to drill down at a more local level to try and understand the agriculture and the issues. So at a national level, there's a lot of advice going out and guidance. There'll be a lot of grants and legislation. We know that the planners play a role in this. And we know at a national level that we're likely to be able to achieve the 16% ammonia reduction. But without more information, we can't guarantee that that would be the case at a local level. And indeed, the Nitrogen Futures report, which has just been produced by the JNCC, is suggesting that local solutions are going to be needed to bring our SSSIs and SACs into good condition. So Paul Hoswell in Natural England has produced a draft evidence paper at the moment and identified all the issues that we know a little bit about and all the sources of information that we don't know anything about. And he's, as part of that, he's taking it to the West Midlands board and going to discuss that with them in the hopes that we can then start drilling down and find a countrywide solution. Obviously, the Herefordshire local plan has, in the core strategy, suggests that it wants to protect and enhance the local environment and biodiversity. So this could potentially feed into that as well, because unless we address those emissions, the chances of doing either of those things is probably fairly minimal. And we also know, and I appreciate you're not the climate change board, but it could also help address climate change in Herefordshire, because if nitrogen losses could be reduced by good management and mitigation measures, that could potentially reduce the amount of synthetic fertilizers that's used in Herefordshire and bring down the carbon footprint of Herefordshire. So this issue's got, obviously there's a Natural England interest in it, there's the potential council interest in it. So really, I just bring this to the table because obviously nitrogen is a critical thing for food security, it is critical for farming going forward. It's a national issue and a local issue. We know the national targets can potentially be achieved with the grant support and the advice that's going into them, but how do we ensure that we're able to resolve the issue at a local level? And is there a role, really, is my question, for the nutrient management plan to help with this, particularly with the fact that it's looking at understanding the nutrient balance that we want to, and we also want to make sure that we're not going to do any potential pollution swapping to protect the River Wye and then potentially damage some of our protected sites. So it's really to put the cards on the table, show where we are, and then throw the topic open, probably to discussions at another meeting. Thanks.
Thanks, Sue. That's very helpful. Martin Williams, I think you're in the meeting twice, supporting feedback.
I am in the meeting twice.
Thank you. And thanks, Sue, for that that brief overview, which was very actually really interesting and deeply concerning. And I feel certain that there will be a role for the Nutrient Management Board to look at this, holistically. And I'm hopeful that the TAG will take that forward. So right, Martin Williams, welcome to the meeting for your first meeting with us.
Thank you. I'm a bit of a new boy. I feel like I'm already being picked on as a farmer with my farmer head on. But interesting presentation, Sue. And as a couple of quizzes, really, you mentioned during the presentation that the other countries have managed to reduce their nitrogen ammonia offtake from a certain amount. What was that level that was higher than the UK's level of nitrate waste?
I can't give you the exact figure, Martin, but it's countries like the Netherlands where they have much more intensive agriculture that have managed to reduce the
Well, it would be
nitrogen.
interesting as a farmer with my farmer hat on, and I'm not poo-pooing it. I'm just asking, where is that higher base from where they started from? And secondly, picking up on the point of this board and the issue why I'm here, we have a magnificent resource in the catchment that, if we can use it more wisely, it already offsets a huge amount of our carbon footprint of importing fertilizer. It's just how we use that resource that we need to look forward to finding a solution with. And I think that can't be parked to one side in this argument. We have massive resource in the county and the catchment, which we must make more use of wisely. Simple as that. So those are my 2 points on your piece, but thank you very much.
I couldn't agree more with the fact that manure and slurries are a fantastic resource, and it's about, as you say, using them wisely and adopting some of the new or the techniques that are available to help us use them more wisely. And there's a huge amount of technology out there, isn't there? And there's now a lot of grant support for some of this technology, such as low emission slurry spreading equipment, covering manure stores, which all sound very unexciting, but can have a large effect on the issue. So I'd be happy to have an offline discussion with you, Martin, to see if we can help in any way as catchment sensitive farming to move this on with the industry in Herefordshire.
Well, on your piece on the nitrates, where a couple of us in the county have had discussions during November, knowing that this might come along, and we are looking to put nitrate monitors near the river and away from the river wirelessly, which are unable to be sold at the moment. They're in development, and we're hoping that those will become phosphate monitors as well as the summer progresses, as the tech becomes available. So there is already an impetus of measuring nitrate leaching into the river.
Yeah, so this is obviously nitrate losses to air that I'm
Yes, you're talking about to air, but we're already looking at it on ground.
Yeah, and David, I noticed David made a good comment about ammonia scrubbers on some of the intensive poultry units, which can reduce ammonia loss significantly. And again, they have a really important role to play. Some of the older units may not be employing those at the moment, but once we've got a better map of the county or better understanding of where the real emission hotspots are, then it's easier to tackle the issue. And if the individuals help to tackle the issue, it helps the industry as a whole.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I'm with you. I'm with you all the way.
Brilliant. Thanks, Martin. Mary?
Hi, and thank you, Sue. That was really, well, I was going to say interesting, but probably sobering, distressing is a better description. Speaking with a construction sector hat on, are we likely to have an overnight moratorium based on ammonia and nitrates? And if so, can we have a bit of advance warning? Because we haven't solved phosphates, and to have other things come along, at what point does it become a restriction on development like they did in the Netherlands? I think Martin referenced the Netherlands. Obviously, we know what happened in the Netherlands and how they fixed it, and they're difficult conversations, but you know, their parliament has legislated to destock the county, prevent manure being spread, and to compulsory purchase farms. So if we can do anything to prevent us having to go to those lengths of measures, that would be great for human health animal health, river health, everything. But how far, Sue, are we off having a Herefordshire-based map pinpointing hotspots? Because I think, I don't know, but I think they kind of collect, don't they? In the air, particles collect as depositions. So if we had a map, we would know where you have areas that needed restrictions and areas that might not be so sensitive. But I don't know if anybody is preparing a map.
CPRW have already produced a map which is available on the CPRW website. Natural England has got an interactive map which I have been trying to access today. Unfortunately, I got a copy of the map, but I wasn't able to get the technology to work to zoom into Herefordshire. Okay. So the information is available, but we need to be able to access it and to drill down to deeper to more local levels to understand the issue and how we can tackle them.
Because once again, feeling kind of putting myself in the position of a decision maker, if you don't have the data, then you can't make a decision. And what we don't want is blanket restrictions that impact on everybody if we can work out how to really pinpoint solutions to where the problem is.
And that was the whole the whole idea behind this draft evidence paper, that we need that information. You know, we need to drill down and information to hand. Otherwise we'll be in the same position potentially, won't we, as we are with phosphate, and that's what we're trying to avoid. We're trying to get in before that. Yeah,
learning lessons from where we all are now and what we've been through for the last 3 years is crucial, because otherwise the whole thing is even more futile than it feels already. So anything that anybody needs to pick up on that we could have done differently if we rolled back to 2019 is going to be helpful and potentially saving all sorts of hardship from all sorts of sectors. But thank you very much. Yes, really, really interesting.
So just one thing, David Lee has just mentioned APIS, the Air Pollution Information Service website. You can actually drill down at SSIs and find the ammonia levels, and also the sources of contribution to the ammonia levels on that. So from a SSI point of view, you can look at individual SSIs, but we need to actually, again, make it more accessible to people, so that the people who are making the decisions don't have to go into websites and start trying to interpret the data.
Thanks. I mean, I was actually looking at some figures the other day which Helen Hamilton provided, which shows a really steep increase. So I think this is something that we need to be not looking at it as a kind of, let's all kind of stroke our beards and stare off into the far distant future. I think this is something we need to be looking at with a degree of urgency. And indeed, that may be something we consider a bit later in the meeting as we discuss the water protection zone idea. But yeah, so if it's rising, then we need to be on top of it yesterday. Helen Stace.
Yeah, I originally put my hand up to answer something of Martin's, but just to answer Mary's question, I think if we'd gone back 20 years, which is when we were first notifying the rivers, what I would say is we should never have allowed all the floodplain meadows to be ploughed up. But anyway, going back to what I was going to say in response to Martin, I can't agree with you about the resource. I have to say that, in my view, the way that we're farming chickens, and I say farming, I don't regard it as farming, it's an an industrial production of huge numbers of birds. And the manure is actually a waste product that is being foisted into our catchment. And I think the time has come to stop thinking of it as a resource that has to be put onto the soil. We've got to find other ways of dealing with it, or we've got to stop having the units. And if you look at the recommendations of the DEFRA inquiry that's just been reported, they suggest that all the local authorities should be refusing any further IPUs.
Simon Evans.
Thank you. Just to say, in the context of the why, if nitrogen is the limiting factor on eutrophication in the why, we're in trouble, because that means that cyanobacter is the dominant flora of the algae, and the river is poisonous. So this is a predominantly terrestrial discussion. I just wanted to make that clear in the thinking of the impact of this on the river.
Thanks, Simon. Yeah, I think this is something that I'd like to take forward and look into in greater detail and depth, in the next few meetings, so that we have a greater understanding of it and how it features with the work that we might be doing as the nutrient management boards, not the phosphate management board. So I think it's very legitimate that we should be looking at this. Martin Williams. And if you're coming back,
replying to the quiz about the waste versus resource, it's not a waste. It is not a waste. If you take the value in nutrient in chicken litter at £67 per tonne, based on what is in it and its ingredient, it's used in the county prolifically, probably a bad word, but prolifically. And if you add the total value paid, the value paid is significantly less than the value of the nutrient. The value paid is around £12 to £15 a tonne. At £15 a tonne, 150,000 tonnes of nutrient, not waste, is worth just under £4 million. £4 million worth of fertilizer brought into the county on a lorry from somewhere else, I would say is a detriment to our carbon footprint. And I think we should celebrate the fact that we are in glorious times of having a nutrient value produced in the county, in the catchment, that can be used in the county. It is how we use it going forward, which has to change, that needs looking at. And I don't think the rhetoric around stopping production, and I'm questioning your nutrient balance as per the environment report. Does that mean the nutrient balance produced in the county or applied in the county, or how does that nutrient balance come into practicality on the ground? But there's a great big difference between a waste and a resource, and chicken litter to the agricultural industry is a resource, and that mustn't be forgotten.
Well, sorry, Helen. No. We're already about 20 minutes over for this segment, so I'm just going to let James have his say so and draw a line under it. Sorry, Helen.
Alyssa, that's kind. Thank you. I mean, first thing I want to say, Martin, it's very, very good to see you present at the board. I really appreciate, and I'm sure others do, that and if you on the English side have joined the meeting and are speaking in the way that you are, and thank you for your leadership. It's really appreciated. I just want to pick up the point you make about value and not being waste. I agree. And I think we can also agree that substituting artificial NPK from the Haber-Bosch process for the nutrient produced on farm is not good. So points of agreement matter rather than polarization. Let's focus on those. Where we disagree, I think, is the total quantity of what you're regarding as a valuable product, and some of us see as a major pollutant. Herefordshire is 60% above the national average in terms of the phosphate load in soils, 17 kg per hectare. That is coming from too many livestock on the land and adjacent to us across the border. And it's flowing down the river. Water doesn't flow uphill. So we have to have cross-border connection between your very good self, and you're doing a great job, thank you. I say that again, and your colleagues in FUW and FU Cymru. And I'm not yet seeing that. And I have a foot in both sides of the border.
Thanks. Thanks, James. Right, we're going to call it, draw a line under that now. Thank you again, Sue, for your presentation, and I'm sure we will return to this fascinating subject at another meeting. Okay, so now, Jenny Gamble, have we got a swift tag update?
Yeah, I'll keep it very brief because we're running late, aren't we? So
Fabulous,
yeah, I can give an update We've had, since the last board meeting, we've had 2 TAG meetings, one on the 3rd of November and one on the 9th of December, and they were both focused on agriculture. From the 3rd of November meeting, we looked at information provided by Natural England on catchment sensitive farming. There's been like a small report produced, and it was suggested that that information could be shared with the board, as it's a kind of good summary of positive action in the catchment and what's going on. And a couple of TAG members have taken that action away, and they're going to look at how best to share that information. There was an update from Wynosque Foundation on the Curlbrook project, which has shown that 5 years of concentrated advice targeted in a specific catchment's got lots of benefits. And the TAG group agreed to come up with a list of projects to bring to the board should resources come available for kind of similar work targeted in smaller subcatchment areas. One thing that TAG did want to raise with the board was we put together some proposals for an autumn spending review early last year, and it was asked what came out, if anything, did anything come out of that? Because I know following discussions that there was a project officer kind of put to the top of the list of must-haves and would-likes. So we do want to just raise that as a question, whether anything did come out of that. We also spoke about RPA referrals, and that TAG have got concerns that there is a time delay when issues are referred to the RPA, and issues that are seen on the ground are then not still happening by the time RPA have planned in their visit. And it's a bit of a barrier to, to getting issues resolved. And so TAG wanted to ask the board if there's any assistance that you could give in that issue. Then 9th of December meeting, we discussed evidence, and is there sufficient evidence at the moment? There's some additional monitoring proposed for phosphates in Wales with Cardiff University and Wynosque Foundation. We discussed abstraction and how much that's been considered in all of this, because obviously it affects concentrations of phosphate in water. And the next TAG meeting, we're going to talk to one of my colleagues. Oh, excuse me, there's somebody at the door. Give me 2 seconds.
Yeah. Well, as far as I'm aware, the autumn spending review did not produce, well, certainly didn't produce any clearly identifiable sums. So there were sums that kind of went in generally to the agencies, but nothing that came specifically for the catchment. Jenny, back to you.
I'm back. Sorry about that. You might hear dogs in the background. I apologise. Yeah, so one of my colleagues for the next TAG meeting hopefully is going to do an overview of the work that she's doing in the Y on abstraction, just to sort of update TAG and give some more information. We discussed legacy phosphate, and I know that Refocus have done a lot of briefings in December to different groups about their findings, so that was discussed. TAG have got concerns that some of the data used in modelling that's been undertaken by different organisations, a lot of that data is getting quite out of date now. Some of it's kind of 10 years old, and there's been a lot of land use changes, especially in Herefordshire in the last 5-10 years. I know Welsh Government have been asked, I think by NRW, to provide more up-to-date information, and we just wanted to highlight that if there's any way that we can get more up-to-date data, because obviously a lot of the modelling is based on figures. So that was raised. And then we looked at certainty from voluntary actions and looking at farm scoper, looking at a possible rerun of farm scoper, because it was last done in 2014. And again, we discussed, would a rerun provide anything useful, or would that resource be better put to something else? We're not sure yet. But there was a suggestion to identify an area, like a geographical area to focus on, generate a collection of measures, and then we could discuss, almost like a case study of measures in a particular area and how that could deliver certainty. And then the final thing, there was a discussion on current and future pressures in the catchment, such as climate change and increasing visitor numbers. and a request for TAG to ask the board, is there an understanding of the cross-sector kind of in combination pressures that are on the catchment, and how much is being taken, you know, how much of that is being kind of considered, you know, when decisions are being made. We've got another meeting for TAG at the end of February. So that's the briefest update I could do today.
That's fantastic, full of very excellent stuff. What support do you need from the board about this issue of the time lag with RPA? Is that something that we could write to DEFRA and say, you know, could they do something about it, or?
Possibly. It came up as a discussion that, because from my understanding is that when a referral is made to the RPA, it then generates them to do a full visit. So obviously they can't just pop out because they have to do a lot of preparation to make their visit worthwhile. But because a lot of the issues don't last very long, that some of those issues have kind of been and gone by the time the RPA visit. So it was just a...
And is that still going to apply with ELMS? Anyway, I mean, who's going to administer ELMS? Does anyone know?
Claire's nodding.
So at the moment, yes, sorry, I was trying to unmute. As we understand it at the moment, the same situation. So it's the scheme is owned by DEFRA, and Natural England provide technical advice to the scheme. Okay, so it would be worth, therefore, the board writing something to say, could you join that up, please? Yes. If we've got concern in terms of time lag with the well, if it compromises the work of one of the statutory agencies, then that's just very frustrating for them, frankly, isn't it? You know, that they're trying to get on, and then everything's got to wait for the RPA to rock up, and by the time they rock up, then there's nothing to see anymore. So that just seems to me to be fairly dysfunctional. Shall I talk internally? Because obviously we've got a liaison with the RPA in Natural England, so I can see a view on who to write to and how to inform that. But I think the board writing to them is, if the TAG's identified a problem that's impacting on the work of this board to deliver the action plan, then this board can write to the RPA. So I'll source a name. If you take that forward as an action, and then if you need the board to do something else, please flag that up. The need for up-to-date data, again, absolutely, we need up-to-date data. So I think nobody on the board's going to object to supporting that, and again, sort of, who do we ask and how do we get it? Yeah, is that okay? Brilliant, thank you very much. And right, Mary Albright, you have a question?
Hi, Jenny. As far as I know, the spending review was declined, but I think now if we prepared a list, and it needs to be costed. That's what Jessie, Faye and Bill have always said, we need to have numbers to the ask. If we went back and asked him, I get the feeling that Jessie feels less controlled by his previous position in the Treasury. So I can't see any harm in making a really clear bullet point list of what we need, how much it's going to cost. Because I don't know if Jim agrees with me, but we've been in meetings where DEFRA have not been a point of resistance. It's been the lack of kind of finite requests with funding attached to the numbers. So I think we should just try again. So if you want a project manager, how much is a project manager? How long do you want them for? If you've got actions that you need to put in place retrospectively, whether it be, I don't know, let's talk about river buffers, for example. If we know that that's going to have a cost attached to it for regulation and enforcement, cost it. And let's ask Jessie, Faye and Bill what they can do to help. I don't think the Y is in a position where anybody would resist looking as if they're helping us. So it's got national scrutiny. We need to leverage that to our benefit so that we ask for what we need and then we do it. Because that leads to my second question. Is there anything that came out of those 2 TAG meetings focused on the primary attribution of the pollution that we can put into the plan that meets the test of scientific certainty, or makes Claire Minette smile and say, everything's fine, Mary can build houses? I'm being silly, but these meetings only work if you have an action attached to the end of the discussion and that action is delivered. So we know what actions the government have recommended, we know what actions Refocus have recommended, and for some reason the board seems really reticent to put those on the table, but we're not doing anybody any favours by letting the problem stack up behind us. So if you think, Jenny, any of the actions you discussed in those 2 meetings warrant going into that table, preferably as a green light, but if not, let's talk about why they're not. Let's do it. Let's not keep talking about it, because people are watching us and thinking that we're not doing what we might be able to do. And that worries me, because it's 2 years, 2.5 years down the road. I'll probably think of something else in a minute.
Thanks, Mary. We can follow that up at the meeting next month and see if there's anything that can be added to the plan. It may be that there isn't, but we will put it as an agenda item.
I'll send you my list of ideas, Jenny, just in case it helps.
Yeah, thanks, Mary. Thank you.
Thanks, Mary. Jim Hicks.
Thanks, Lisa. Just to back that up, really, it's a call for the still elusive agricultural diffuse measures which can deliver the certainty that is now urgently needed, and we've been calling for quite some time, but it seems that others are catching on to that without the certainty, there are legal risks apparently now towards the agencies and the competent authorities, and talking about the pre-action letter that we've seen from Wild Justice. So this does need to be taken seriously now. The voluntary measures are all well and good. Those have been tried. We know that they haven't really delivered. And so now surely the time is to bring forward diffuse measures which are going to deliver measurable and certain outcomes. Otherwise, I think things aren't looking great going forward for a whole host of reasons. And just to offer the support again with going to the MPs, we're more than happy, Mary and I are more than happy to facilitate further meetings with Jesse, Norman and others. Jesse's been very helpful and willing to sort of take up the cause and to do what he can. So we're willing to help in any way we can as a lobby group to sit in on that. So that's all I have to say, really.
Thanks, Jim. Claire Minette.
Yeah, thanks, Lisa. Just to come in on that and say what I always say at the at this Nutrient Management Plan Board meeting. Obviously, just that action plan. The purpose of that action plan is to really drive phosphate reduction and achieve favourable conservation status on the river. And for that, you're absolutely right. We need more actions. We're doing a load of work around agri-environment, voluntary actions, and we're using those, but we want more actions to feed into that action plan that reduce diffuse pollution. Those need to come from a variety of sources. And I think one thing that I'd like to be really clear with Jim around is across the country where this is also an issue, developers have been putting forward those nutrient neutrality proposals themselves. So we've always said that achieving certainty in the action plan is a longer term game. It's not going to happen overnight. We're not suddenly going to be able to ensure that those voluntary measures give that certainty you need for not development, but you achieve that through proposals that deliver nutrient neutrality against that development. And we haven't seen any of those. We haven't seen those come forward. I know we've got the integrated wetland one, but other than that, we haven't seen others. And so one idea that we could do through the tag or Natural England could just do is maybe draw together a list from across the country to give you ideas of those kind of actions that are happening elsewhere for you to have a look at and put those forward in terms of nutrient neutrality, because that's how you unlock development in the short term. You demonstrate that that development is then that then you've got a project that actually neutralizes the nutrients from that development, and that's how you unlock development in the short term. And then we keep trying to deliver on the action plan. We keep putting all our energy into thinking of projects and solutions that will help reduce diffuse pollution, but that is always a longer term game. That's not going to happen overnight.
Just a very quick response then, so that Claire, because Hayley and I spoke about this morning, Claire, but the wetlands is crucial because we don't have a trading platform. So until we get that, nobody can really demonstrate the certainty you want through private delivery. But for example, we've invested over £1 million buying a farm to bring forward the betterment. So there's 51 kilograms of phosphate up for grabs. So we are doing it, but Brilliant. It's very difficult to get the criteria list that you've given us. Is almost impossible to meet. And that's been one barrier, but I know Jim's going to say the same thing. There are developers out there literally scrabbling and spending hundreds of thousands of pounds trying to find solutions. But the network you've given us, or the calculator, the criteria, the measurement of certainty, it's impossible. But we're all draining money out trying to find private delivery betterment. So it's not through lack of trying, but that trading calculator, which Rachel and I have spoken about, without that, nobody can do very much at all, because we have these credits and we can't demonstrate them to you. So I think that that's probably a misunderstanding by the backlog that's built up, and the fact that we waited for the calculator and the wetland, which I want to reiterate that development is paying for that wetland. So we're not sitting here saying we want it done for us. We've put the money there and we're buying the credit. So it's probably a misunderstanding that we're not doing anything. It's just that they're so hard to get over a benchmark.
Right, okay, then no, that's really helpful feedback, and we'll continue to have those conversations and work with you to.
Thank you. I think that'd be very helpful, Claire, if you could do that. Brilliant. Helen Dale, CLA. Hey, Helen.
Hi. Just to go back to Mary's earlier point, which I completely agree with, we should be pushing more resources within the catchment. There is, within the nutrient management plan, there's already a list of recommendations that were approved by us as a nutrient management plan board last time we looked at it. And those really should be the priority for any resources that we're asking for, because that is certainly going to come up when we look at the water protection zone suggestion. My position is going to be that until we've answered those questions in the nutrient management plan, that we're not really in a position to have that discussion at all. And then again, agree with Mary again, the feedback that I'm getting is the nutrient calculator works on part of the equation, but not on the other part. And we're looking for Natural England to kind of lead that and give a stronger steer.
Thank you. Phil Crossland.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to pick up on that point about resources and a project manager. I think he's actually more than that, and I think our leader summed it up in his letter to DEFRA when he's actually suggested that we should have a project director, which is actually locally employed. No disrespect to any of the national agencies on here, but you are to some extent limited by national policies and the way things work. If it was employed as a local project director to coordinate the national agencies across both countries and the stakeholders, they could perhaps pull things together. She could perhaps force delivery slightly better, and also could knock on the doors of Whitehall perhaps more efficiently than a locally employed project manager for one of the national agencies. So I'm strongly of the view it should be somebody that reports into the sort of nutrient management board, who is employed locally to coordinate and work with the national agencies rather than be perhaps directed by the national agencies, if you see what I mean. I think a degree of independence of the local employment, pushing local delivery and those local solutions would be the right way to go.
Thanks, Phil. Okay, I'm mindful of the time now, so we'll just take Helen Stace and then draw a line under this.
Yeah, I was just pulling up on my comment in the chat, wondering what was happening to the Herefordshire Council work that they started to do on sort of looking at a nutrient trading platform. I know they've had the 3 reports done, and I think, our expectation was that something would come out that would enable us to do more. And I know that as a wildlife trust, if there were ways of doing trading on the back of nutrient measures, then I would be able to get patient loans that would enable me to buy larger areas of land and do more. So if we can,
perhaps that can be in the update from Herefordshire Council in the that bit of the agenda. If whoever's doing that update could bear that in mind and answer, that would be great. Okay,
Chair, I'll cover that.
That's lovely. Thank you very much. Right, I'm going to draw a line under that bit of discussion. The next agenda item is the regular update on the regulatory measures, number of visits, enforcements and prosecutions. Since this is really just a matter of reporting numbers and we are tight for time, can I ask the various agencies to do that in writing to the board, please? How many visits, how many enforcements, how many prosecutions since the last board meeting? Is that okay from EA, NRW?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good for me. Thank you.
Bless your hearts. Thank you very much. Right. So agenda item 7, WPZ, and actually sort of following on a bit from the conversation that we've been having about Claire, is that a real hand up, or is it a legacy hand? Legacy hand. So legacy hand. Right. Okay. So following on from the discussion about, you know, what was happening with the autumn spending review, and indeed the ammonia discussion, it seems like this is kind of, you know, it's an interesting meeting to have this come forward. So at Prime Minister's questions on the 22nd September 2021, Jessie Norman MP raised the issue of the River Wye and was assured by Dominic Raab, who was standing in for Prime Minister, that the government will do everything we can to support you in preserving it for future generations. So since the government is the end of the line with this suggestion, this is what we may be testing that intention today. So I mean, you'll all be aware that that I've always argued to keep the option of a water protection zone on the table in the action plan for the Nutrient Management Board. And indeed, it was about, I think it was this meeting last year that I suggested that preparatory work should be considered by the statutory agencies. The background here is sort of in 2015, there was a case brought by Fish Legal and others against DEFRA for failure to protect the rivers and non-compliance with the Water Framework Directive. And the judgment was that they needed to use all available regulatory tools, and they had 6 years to demonstrate results. Otherwise, water protection zone, in other words, additional regulatory measures would need to be considered. And so that was obviously 6 years ago, and here we all are. Obviously, there have been regulatory changes in the interim, which we have to bear in mind. Farming rules for water, for instance. And so, you know, there has to be time for regulatory change to be phased in, to take effect, and to be judged. And I believe the EA are reviewing farming rules for water at the moment, but there are concerns about the efficacy of that regulation. The other thing that I think is a game changer really is the work done by the University of Lancaster in deepening our understanding of the role of legacy phosphate and whether or not that's actually even something that can be addressed by existing regulatory measures. The Wye soils are, you know, particularly don't bind phosphate well, and therefore, you know, it's mobilized and it leaches, and we have an abundance of it, and that's not something that I can see is covered by existing legislation. It is not going to be visible through Olsen P or crop available phosphate. So it seems to me that there are reasonable grounds at this point to argue that the existing regulatory arrangements are insufficient within this catchment, and other measures should be considered. And I'm also going to say that this is not an either or. To pick up on the point I think Helen was saying about, you know, we have to let all these things run, but we can do these things simultaneously. They don't have to happen, you know, one after the other. You know, we can start a process as well as do other things, it seems to me, and this is one of those occasions where I think that would be a good thing. So it was always the hope of the Nutrient Management Board that the actions to reduce agricultural diffuse pollution could be forthcoming via voluntary measures. And there has been sustained effort, multi-million-pound investment in the catchment in this hope. But, you know, what the source apportionment tells us is that whereas in 2014 it was roughly 45% water treatment to agricultural diffuse, that has shifted with more coming from agricultural diffuse. And so therefore, that suggests that the voluntary measures are not having the desired effect. And the various sort of percentages, you know, they vary, roughly 25%, 66%, and then the University of Lancaster more recently putting 71% to agricultural diffuse against 26% from the sewage treatment works, with an equivalent accumulation of 3,000 tonnes per annum into the soils and thence into the river. So it's not unreasonable to conclude that voluntary measures, whilst working in individual cases, are not being effective in reducing the overall contribution from agriculture. And believe me, I have a lot of sympathy for farmers who are trying very hard to do the right thing and who will be swept up with any further regulatory control. And I would like at this point to pay tribute to farmers that we have within Herefordshire who are leading the way, who are extraordinary, who are doing great work. And unfortunately, that they are not all of the story. And I, you know, I absolutely deeply feel for them. I think, you know, I think Martin Williams in a recent interview gave good examples of practice that would have a beneficial impact, of buffer zones, cover crops, and only applying the phosphate where it's needed. The latter, of course, being in farming rules for water. So we shouldn't really be seeing excessive phosphate levels, but we are. So WPZ is already being used in the Axe catchment with a glide path to 2024, and that would seem to be helping that. So that's the idea, that you have a glide path, and if the targets aren't met, a WPZ is triggered. And it's important to be realistic about an agreed rate of reduction and so forth. But we have to also bear in mind that the original date for the Water Framework Directive was 2027. You know, and here we are 2022, if not now, when? So voluntary measures and existing regulatory measures are not working, in my view. Time to reach for the last tool in the box, hope that it works. In 2014, we felt that we had world enough and time to fix this issue using the softly approach of voluntary measures. Now, in the light of the algal blooms, we have to reassess. And I was on a Zoom meeting the other day. I asked a panel of experts how long they thought it was before the Y becomes irrecoverable. Only one panelist answered, and that was Simon Evans, and he thought it would be about 2 years. So I'm not saying that Simon is right, and I pray to every God that he is wrong. But consider this: if he is wrong, but we act as though he is right, with a sense of urgency and a complete commitment to do all that is necessary, what's the worst that can happen? If he's right and we behave as if he is wrong, we continue to do small measures and fiddle while Rome burns, what's the worst that can happen? Ashes will be our legacy. So in the words of the General Confession, let us not leave undone those things which we ought to have done. And therefore, pursuant to Section 93 and Schedule 11 to the Water Resources Act 1991, I'm therefore proposing that the Nutrient Management Board makes a formal request to the Environment Agency and NRW to design the glide path and make the application to the Secretary of State and Welsh Government to make an order for a catchment-wide water protection zone without further delay. Furthermore, I'm asking that the Nutrient Management Board approve the sending of a letter to the Secretary of State and Welsh Government to support this action. We do not have world enough and time to do less. Do I have a seconder for this proposal? James.
Alyssa, before I or anyone else seconds, and thank you for your heartfelt and very reasoned plea, I feel a word of caution, but not hesitancy, might be needed. So I want to make a few points about, firstly, the situation in Wales, where we currently have a regulatory gap because the water pollution control of water pollution from agricultural regs are not fully implementable until the 1st of January next year. So in the interim, only the most minimal measures apply, and it's business as usual. There is vast amounts of manure, digestate, and other things being spread, no doubt, as we speak. I mean, it's deeply problematic that 1 year, it has been 2 years, but there is a gap. What that means is that nutrients are still being applied, and we're not biting into the 10 years of legacy phosphate that we know exists. What we've heard from Martin is a willingness to engage. He's demonstrating that. But what I'm not seeing yet is a meaningful engagement by us, other than Simon, who I know has been heavily involved, by us as a nutrient management board, with Martin as the county leader of the NFU and the group of farmers that he built around him, who are willing to move and work with us. We need to have a meaningful conversation with Martin's group before, and we have, in my view, we have to have exhausted the possibility that NFU and Martin's 40 farmers, and that isn't enough, cannot deliver what needs to be delivered. Because otherwise, I don't think ministers or the Environment Agency will listen to demand for a water protection zone. We have to have exhausted that possibility.
Thanks, James. Just to make it clear, it is not within the gift of the board to ask the Secretary of State. It's within the gift of the board to ask the Environment Agency and Natural Resources Wales to start the process doesn't happen overnight. It will take, I don't know, 3-4 years. So what I'm suggesting is that if we don't start now, when are we going to start? Next year, year after next? You know, we've been doing this since 2014. The river hasn't got the year after next. We have to stop faffing about. Sorry. But it doesn't mean to say that we don't also continue to talk constructively with farmers like Martin and work with them and hope that it never becomes necessary to make this happen. But we have to make a start. That's the point. Mary.
I was going to say exactly the same, Melissa, that it's not something that will happen overnight and it's not something the board can do. So we've still got loads of time to work with the farmers that want to do something different. But we've also now got the kind of evidence and support of the government and research data from a university that we've never had before. And like you say, this has been talked about kind of in voluntary collaborative terms since 2014. If you gave me 3 years to fix it without a moratorium, I definitely would find a way of every house not delivering an ounce of phosphate. So I think that given the timescale involved, it doesn't mean not working with farmers, and I would hate to think that we ever said that that was where we'd come to. So I think we have got time to still work together, but it would send the wrong message not to take a step that we had been discussing for a couple of years since I've been on the board at least, now that we have all the data and the kind of national impetus to do something. So it might be that we look at it and we shape it as a river buffer rather than a blanket protection zone, which I think is where the points of contention have come from in Wales, why they're probably not as engaged with it as possible. But we know river edges are a risk. A water protection zone can be shaped to be a river buffer. So it could be that we tailor the water protection zone to be the best practice for all land uses. But I would support Alyssa, and I thought your speech was well measured, Alyssa, thank you.
Thanks, Mary. I mean, I think, yeah, the point is it would be better to you know, even if it wasn't good, we could call it a phosphate protection zone, you know, but it would be useful if farmers like Martin were engaged kind of positively with this and saying, right, well, this is what I think would work, so that they have full input there, rather than you know, not doing that. And I think that would be my you know, I think that would be the best way forward, is that we accept that it may be necessary, we hope not, but that these are the things that would work. Yeah, Helen Dale, CLA.
I mean, it won't come as any surprise that I'm certainly not going to vote for the instigation of starting the process for water protection zone. And firstly, for the reasons I mentioned earlier, there are already a number of actions recognised in the nutrient management plan, which we've all agreed is a lack of information that we need. And I think we need to address those gaps. So I think similar to comments that James made, he's making all efforts to resolve those grey areas that still are within the management plan. Secondly, I think that, I mean, I'm not from within the county, but I've seen the work that Wolf are doing, that Martin is doing, that's starting to build momentum amongst farmers within the county. And I think this risks damaging that. And then thirdly, I think not to underestimate the resources that are going to be required for a water protection zone. And I would certainly at the moment rather see those resources starting to address some of the issues you've already identified.
Can I butt in and say, can I thank James for his kind words? And I agree with Helen. The engagement that we've got now, James mentioned 40 farmers. We've now got 250 who've signed up to cutting phosphate. That's within 4 months. We haven't even started yet getting the big numbers. We've gone to the county, spreading the word around what we're doing and the reasons behind it. And I think, along with James, that it would be a shame to put a foot on that engagement at this stage when we have got momentum. Secondly, the NVZ issue in Wales has been a thorny issue over the last few months. It seems it's been fought, it's been lost, it's been won, it's been whatever, but the Powys issue to us is a monster. And to put a barrier up to Herefordshire, let's say Herefordshire as an agricultural community, when you are not looking cross-border, I think would be folly. I don't believe it would be possible to do. Thirdly, the farming rules for water are now in place and being enforced. And for me, enforcement is as important as anything that you've spoken about. And to add another level of unenforced legislation seems a waste of time when we're not enforcing what's there already. I and the group of farmers that met back in the autumn have been pushing for enforcement of the rules in this county, and we have a meeting next month which hopefully can further that discussion with the EA. On the other point, on the other side of it, what is the end game of a water protection zone in relation to the agriculture in Herefordshire? Agriculture in Herefordshire gets a bad press. Last night was a climate change meeting. It was getting a bad press for being a CO2 contributor. We are the largest industry in the county. The largest industry in the county. We are going to be under scrutiny. We are covering a large landmass. But what are you hoping for as an end game? If your end game is that you want to curtail the largest industry in Herefordshire, then say it now. And if that's what your end game is, you go for your life. But you'll come across a lot of opposition, in particular from me and the other 2,500 farmers in the county. So I would suggest that you need to do some sort of calculation before, unless you've done it, and I'm the new boy here today, I don't know what you've been up to up until now, unless you've done it, have you calculated what impact a water protection zone placed on Herefordshire agriculture will have on the income of this community? Have you done that? And the other thing, as a last point, and I'm not going to labour it because I'm a new boy, is this group willing to support the change that agriculture needs? And is it willing to progress anything that comes forward that is a positive move towards what we're aiming to achieve with the phosphate initially, and then going on from that with carbon and nitrates? Is it willing? That's my question to you. But I would not want to support a water protection zone at this stage. And I know you've been waiting, but we haven't been on the same page until this last few months. And I would be very, very disappointed to see that happen now. Sorry, I've said my piece.
That's all right. Thanks, Martin. I think the water, the board is not here to design it or to implement it or anything. It's just to suggest that the EA and NRW might take the next step. The designing of it is bespoke to the catchment, and it would be, I think, a good idea to have input from people like yourself to design one that is not going to be to the destruction or disbenefit of agriculture. The end game is to save the river. That is the end game. And that's what we're all here to do. Or at least that was my understanding. Simon.
I just want to clarify something that Alyssa said to me. As I said, the reason why I think we are in severe danger of trophic change on the river is because there are a number of species, keystone species on the river that have 4-year life cycles. We're 2 years in now. And if we get to the end of their life cycle without them being able to reproduce, and well, they can reproduce, but the juveniles have got no cover because the ranunculus isn't there, then we are at risk of trophic change within the river. That's the slightly scary thing that we're looking down the barrel of. The situation with the WPZ is that I don't think anything that just comes in England will work. I think it would have to be both countries. I've just seen the whether there is a nutrient budgeting scenario, so much as they do on Chesapeake Bay. That works. Farming exists within that scenario. Farming flourishes within that scenario. Each area has a nutrient budget, and nutrient budgets are traded. That type of a scenario would work. But we are getting something across the line in Wales when they've just seen the angst of trying to get MVZ rules in Wales. I would like David Lee's opinion of that, but we do have to find a way that basic rules can be effective. I think that's the challenge going forward.
Muted. Rachel?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm not speaking for or against the motion, but I will give a professional view. I think the starting point for me is, as with other aspects of climate change, it's complicated. We live in a world that is heading to 9.9 billion people by 2050. And we live on an island that has food insecurity and depends on imports. And therefore getting this right is important. I don't think it's always helpful to get into a farmers versus developers debate, because what I see of the farming sector is part of the sector wanting to come forward, wanting to change, and is in a position to change. I also see part of the farming sector that would like to make a change, but is tied by high rental costs or high debt costs, and struggles to make a change because of that. And then there is, of course, part of the sector that, to be honest, isn't willing to understand the need to make a change yet. But that's changing, and it's been encouraging to hear today that that is changing. I think when it comes to water protection zones, could we do one tomorrow, or should one be done tomorrow, or should we invite the Environment Agency and DEFRA to do it tomorrow? Probably not. Should it be looked at on its own? Definitely not. The 2007 DEFRA research that looked at it in agricultural pollution in a marine context showed that a water protection zone on its own is probably not helpful, but a water protection zone with advice, with support, and support means cash, as well as enforcement is. So it would have to be part of a catchment-specific designed set of measures in order to work. The other thing is 2027 is on the horizon. It is coming close. And actually having, as Poole Harbour does, a glide path on if we don't hit a certain level by a certain date, then we need to move to the next stage. Everybody understanding a framework, I think, would be incredibly helpful. So a water protection zone is something to be considered, but it needs to sit into a wider framework of support, advice, and enforcement. And it needs to sit in a glide path so that everybody knows how we're moving and we begin to move together. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Rachel. Jim Hicks.
A question, really. So if the board were to vote for commencing the process of installing a WPZ, I've seen in the chat someone said that it would take 10 years or so to, from instigation to actually becoming law. Doesn't that then give us 10 years to effectively properly address the problem. And if it's not needed, if in those intervening 10 years or whatever the period is, if it's 5 years, say, if everything's solved and sorted and everything's okay within those 5 years, can the process be stopped, or is it, once it's set in motion, does it then carry on and become law? That's my question, really. I think
well,
if
the model
there's an
that we're looking at
opportunity
with the glide path would suggest that it's not, it only sits there if you don't achieve the glide path.
Yeah, so in that case I don't really understand what the issue is with commencing it, because if we're saying that it's not necessary because all of these other measures will work, well then why I'm struggling to understand the issue with commencing it if in the end it may not even be necessary.
Good question. Grace?
Thanks, Alyssa. And just to follow up on Jim's point, I think, Jim, you're asking the question that a lot of people are nodding their heads to be honest. And I just want to say, so hello everyone, I'm Grace White from the Environment Agency. This is my first board meeting. I just want to say thanks to the people so far that have raised your views. It is really good to hear them, and that's part of my role here, is just to, so I'm not going to be voting on this one, I'm going to be abstaining, but it's really valuable to hear what you all think and feel and what your recommendation is. Just a reminder that as the action plan, like water protection zone is one of the options that we have open and available to us. Discussion and work is happening in the EA at a local level to see what steps are needed. So Jim, in answer to your question about how long would it take and what's needed, I'll be honest, right now I don't know, but I'm going to find that out. So just say we haven't formally started the process of it, but we are finding out what steps are needed. And as a reminder, we are continuing the other measures and tools available to us at the moment. So the monitoring, advice, enforcement. And it's key, as everyone said, we do need to give time for the measures and legislation to make a difference, as outlined in the action plan as well. And as I said, I can't promise we can formally start doing this in the EA. I just want to make that point there, but I am listening and I do appreciate all your views, and I'll take whatever the recommendation is back to the EA. Thanks, Alyssa.
Thanks, Grace. Phil Crossland.
Thank you, Chair. I just really at a point, if it's a ministerial final decision in several years down the line, there is a glide path, and one would assume the minister will actually only make that decision on the evidence in front of him at the time of making that decision. Therefore, if the river is no longer at risk, the minister wouldn't make the decision to formally implement it. Would seem the most common sense and logical approach. That would be how it would work. But obviously that would need just checking out. But I can't see how a minister can make a decision on evidence that is, say, in the D water protection zone would be in 10 years out of date when it was first talked about. It was glide path to a solution that was required in the end because it wasn't done by voluntary measures.
Thank you. Very helpful. Liz Duberly.
Afternoon, Grace. I think it would just be really helpful to understand a little bit more about the process of making WPZ and what the glide path might look like for the River Wye. And I just wonder if that's something that we could bring to the next board potentially, just a presentation on that, because I know that we've done some research internally and it's quite difficult to find any detail around how the process works.
Alyssa, can I come back on that one? No, Elizabeth, yeah, good question. So I think what might be good is that we could bring examples of what other areas have done. So we could bring maybe like what the River Acts have done. If that's in place, we could use that as an example. I don't feel like it's good if I could promise that that would be exactly the same as what we do in the Wye, that those timeframes would be the same for us. And I can't promise that we can get that in place, so that our glide path in place and those timeframes in place for the next board. But I can certainly bring an update as to what other places across the country have done. So I think that'll be helpful for us, if that's all right. Yeah. Cool.
Could it be possible that whales are introduced into this discussion? I can't see how, when you have a burning bonfire coming down the river, that you have to make changes at the base of the river when the bonfire is lit north of you and not being discussed, and that just seems to be a failing in this discussion, maybe.
Well, if they want to pipe up, they're welcome to.
No. I don't think if they want to pipe up, they don't want to pipe up. I think discussions need to be had. I don't think it's a case of anyone wanting to pipe up, because that's obviously not the case. They don't want to pipe up. But I think that Powys is integral to what happens in Herefordshire. When you've got a river coming in at 0.28, giving us 0.2 of a limit, I think it's unfair to deal with a problem down here that isn't put into the Welsh court.
I completely agree with you, Martin. The proposal is that the request is the Environment Agency and NRW, the Secretary of State and the Welsh Government.
That's fine. That's good, as long as Wales are included.
Oh, absolutely.
Wales are doing a lot. Yeah, we're doing a lot. We're certainly included in this. I think one of the failings of the group listening to the discussions is that we don't take an holistic cross-border approach sometimes. So yeah, anything we can do to come up with cross-border solutions. For instance, monitoring the river on the same day. I've put people in touch with EA and NRW to try and arrange sampling programs so they're done on the same day. So down the river to give us a better view of the data, for instance. So yeah, there's lots happening. Separately, Martin, I'd like to have a chat with you about your farmers and what you've done to encourage them, but I'll come back to you.
No problem.
Thanks. Helen Stace?
Yeah, I think listening to what everybody said, I mean, it's clear that there are a number of solutions that we can pursue in trying to fix the problem on the river. And I can see that the farming community are well engaged with this. We've already had a lot of years of voluntary measures without the results that we hoped for. So it could take some time for that to show any results. We've got Avara looking at what they can do with the phosphates in their manure. We've got all those cross-border issues, and I can't see any problem at all with pursuing all of those avenues of approach. But at the same time, knowing how long it might take to get a WPZ in, starting the process. I don't think it's denigrating the efforts of the farming community or bashing the efforts. It's a belt and braces situation. Can't afford to wait, however many years the farming community and Avara think they need to put their things in place and then decide that it doesn't work and then have to go for 10 years of getting a protection zone in. I think we need to run the processes concurrently and pursue all avenues actively and support all of the communities that are trying to help.
Is there any mechanism for showing the impact from the water protection zone?
Well, you have to design it first.
Well, is that part of the process once you've applied for it, or do you do that before you apply for it?
That would be done. Well, no, because that would be done by the EA, and then the EA and NRW would make the application based on these are the specifics. They're bespoke, so it might be that you'd say, well, you need 10-meter buffer strip, or you need whatever it is. It's bespoke to the situation.
Well, reading the one on the D, it was quite restrictive by what I read of it.
That was in industry, so it's slightly different, isn't it? It's not agriculture on the D. But yeah, I mean that's my understanding. So the suggestion today is not to design it, and it's not to it's simply to say, can we start this process? Because it's a very long process. And it doesn't, if we do everything, we have to wait for everything. I think the point that Helen just made was very eloquently put. If we wait for everything to conclude before we start something else, given the peril that the river is in, I think we would not be doing the best job that we can to protect the river. James.
Elisa, thank you for letting me come back. I'm not mandated wearing my Brecon Beacons National Park Authority hat to vote on this today, so I'm going to abstain. But were I wearing my Herefordshire resident hat, I would take a different view. I'm going to suggest, I will speak privately, if I may, with Martin. He's kindly sent me his number in the chat. But I would like with Simon to try and convene a meeting between Martin and his counterparts in FUW and NFU Cymru, because I think that is potentially the way to engage with NFU Cymru and FUW. It's much more difficult for us to do it directly ourselves, even through POES. But if Martin's up for it, I think it's worth trying.
Okay, thank you. Phil Crossland.
Thank you, Chair. It was really just on the point of whether this was an English thing or a cross-border England-Wales thing. I think, again, just in terms of a common sense approach by any minister of in government, wouldn't sign an order that was just one. He would. I think both. It would have to be negotiated between the ministers of the different governments and agreed. I can't imagine that they would ever sign something that was just relevant in England. When, as you say, Martin, a lot of it is coming down from Paris. So I think it would definitely have to be cross-border. But as people have eloquently said, it's a long process. If we don't start now and we wait till the river has actually failed, you've then got 5 or 10 years after that. So I think the hope is it would never be needed, but it's worth looking at that should it be necessary.
Yeah, Fergus.
Thank you, Chair. Just unfortunately, like others, we will abstain on this because we think it's inappropriate for Welsh Water to comment on it, partly because we're not really close enough and aware enough of the implications of a water protection zone. Having said that, whatever happens, whatever the decision is, and if EA and NRW start working on it, we will fully support and throw our full support behind that and do whatever is needed to support the development of that or whatever measures they need. So just to make that really clear, we will support any measures taken. The other thing is just to repeat something that our managing director said in the Wales Land Management Forum earlier this week, which is that whilst we have a large investment program, I'll give you a bit of an update on that, we're very happy to take that investment and invest that on farming land or other land or in other places, particularly where there is some kind of regulatory floor against which we're comparing this. So we're paying landowners to do more than their minimum regulatory requirements. And if that's a more sustainable way to do this and that's more effective and has greater benefits, then we will definitely do that. So we can give that commitment as well. Thank you.
Thank you. It's really helpful. Mary Albright.
Just to ask, it's probably Claire. Sorry, Claire, I always feel like I'm picking on you, but would a water protection zone in the future or a potential water protection zone be enough to give you certainty to say the plan was scientifically certain?
A water protection zone, I can't answer that off the, sorry, I can't answer the complications. I think the important thing is a water protection zone is a good few years down the road, isn't it? Yeah. It's also not something, yeah, it's obviously
because we know that
by the Environment Agency, so it's not something that I have all the details of in my head, and also because they're different for every area, aren't they? So what it would do if it was implemented is certainly contribute towards the action plan. Imagine the thinking beforehand in terms of what it was going to deliver against phosphate reductions would happen. The detail of whether it can apply to certainty or not, yeah, I couldn't give you an answer off the top of my head now, but it would certainly form part of that action plan in terms of, yeah, the reductions it would then bring.
It just seems to me that Refocus gave us the 3,000 tonnes or the 17 kilograms per hectare measurements, so we know what is going in terms of excess. We know what legacy phosphate is in the soil, and we know the soils can't hold it. But we also have the recommendations from government and Refocus to not apply manure to ground. So to me, it's not, it shouldn't be viewed as a restriction or a kind of limitation of how we all work together before it's implemented, but it is a kind of a measure that would definitely have certainty and mathematical assessment behind it that makes the plan work, which means the river does have a chance of restoration. And I would be delighted more than anybody to say, right, we didn't need that water protection zone, we can row back because we fixed it ourselves. But we are 7 years down the line of trying to fix it ourselves. And it hasn't worked, and it doesn't look as if we've got anything in the plan or coming from TAG that if you'd come and said, we've got these 3 measures, they're going to go in, that's great, but we can't keep hoping that there's something that we haven't discovered yet. So I'm cautious, because I know that a blanket ban on anything, trust me, Martin, I know more than anybody, a blanket ban is hard, and it's so hard to get out of as well. But if we could do something that meant that the plan had a bit of breathing space for you guys to do whatever you want to do or think you can do, that's surely a positive. And I think Fergus's offer, that's something we should kind of really explore. That's brilliant offer of kind of another innovative way of looking at how we secure these actions. But we have to do something more than what we've done. Everybody said that. It's not us. It's not me saying that anymore. It's everybody saying what we've been doing is not enough.
Thanks, Mary. Helen Stace.
I just wanted to go back to your very original question, which was anybody prepared to second your proposal? And I am prepared to second that proposal.
Thanks, Helen. And well, a final brief word from Tom Tibbetts.
Thank you, Chair. I won't be controversial. I thought your opening speech was very cogent and made fair points, and it does seem to be a general consensus in this meeting that something ought to be done, and that we've been trying for 7 or 8 years now to make effective change, and sadly the environmental results shown are not bearing any fruit yet. I thought Martin put it very nicely when he spoke about Welsh engagement. Of course they don't want to speak up, they have to be forced to speak up. But at the same time, Martin, from my perspective as a citizens organisation, that's sort of the view that we're taking of your opposition to even considering to start this process to a water protection zone, because you just will not countenance it seems to my mind, even though the actual implementation process could take as long as a decade, which if Simon Evans is to believe is already far too late. So I doubt very much whether any further debate in this forum is going to change anyone's mind or change the voting intentions that were actually intended right at the beginning of this particular agenda item. But I would urge everybody here to consider supporting the motion, and let's get a bit of teeth into the enforcement so that there is a bit more impetus for our wonderful farmers who we are all dependent on as people. We all need food to eat, so we owe a great debt of gratitude to farmers, but we also need to help them get their house in order and make sure that the river, which is so very valuable to all of us as residents or as tourists or as local businesses, is kept in the condition it needs to be kept in for the future generations. Thank you.
I'd like to just take you up on, I'm not against change, and I'm absolutely 100% for helping the river and putting it straight. I live by it and look at it every day. However, as a new boy to this, and knowing what I know outside of this room, it seems, because I'm just coming to this, I don't know what's gone on before, but I'm not interested in what you've done before. I'm interested in what you do going forward if I'm going to be involved in this. And I'd like to think that we have a good chance of making a difference, but it has to be cross-border. I agree with that. I agree things haven't gone as well as they should have, but to add another level of legislation, where is the policing? We haven't got policing on the initial legislation. We haven't got policing on the EA. We haven't got policing on the farm rules for water. We haven't got policing on acts of spillage, acts of runoff. Where is the policing? To add another bank of legislation for the sake of it, without policing what you've already got, seems to me almost irrelevant. So unless you can back up what is going forward with what has gone behind, which we haven't done as yet, I think it's a shame. But there we go. I've said my piece.
Okay. Thanks, Martin, and we've heard you. Thank you. Right. Okay. So I think we've all chewed the fat long enough about this. Obviously, I'm a vote for. Phil Crossland.
I'd vote for it, Chair. Thank
you. Do we have a representative from Monmouthshire County Council here? There's Craig O'Connor on my list. No. Councillor Phelps from Forest of Dean District Council. Is he on the call? Anyone from Forest of Dean District Council? Peter Morris from Paris.
Yeah, I'm not a councillor, I'm an officer.
Right, you have a vote.
Yeah, so I'm not sure that I should be. I do have a vote, do I?
You do have a vote, and you can abstain if, which is.
Yeah, I would abstain.
Okay,
thank you.
That's all right. Jenny Gamble, Environment Agency.
I'm not a voting member of this, Alyssa.
According to this list.
That would fall to Grace.
Probably Grace, because it's gone from Dave, hasn't it? Okay.
Yeah.
Grace, I would imagine you'll abstain.
Yeah, I'm going to abstain, Alyssa.
Okay, and Martin Williams against, yeah. Simon Evans.
On the basis of our charitable objects, I have to vote for.
Helen Dale.
Against.
Against. Helen Stace.
For.
Marie Albright.
Reluctantly for.
Yeah, same thing.
Claire Manette.
Statutory agency to abstain.
Yep. We don't have a representative from Farm Herefordshire, do we, at the moment? And David Lee.
I'm going to abstain.
Fair enough.
Lisa, can I make my vote conditional upon Welsh engagement? Because this can't be a penalty on Herefordshire farmers that is that they have to do the heavy lifting. It just that they just can't. We can't go down that route.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. The proposal is very much both sides and a catchment wide.
Yeah.
Nothing else will work. And I don't think anyone would want to support anything that, you know, nobody would. It wouldn't make sense.
Yeah.
So there are sufficient number of votes to take this to the next step. So I'll draft a letter and we'll either do that via email or at the next meeting to ask the EA NRW to start to look at that. Thank you. Helen, you have a hand up. Is that a...
Yeah, I'm just, what final votes then? Can you count them up? Because I'm not quite sure with the number of abstentions. It doesn't seem like it was a majority view to proceed.
Okay, well, it was 5 for, 2 against, and the rest were abstentions.
How many abstentions?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
So how do those? I mean, I'm unsure the post.
Well, there'd be a kind of neutral.
Feel like
they don't.
Majority on the board that has.
So an abstention doesn't register in either for or against. It's simply a non-vote. So there are more in favour than there are against.
Okay, so and the voting principles are laid down in our terms of reference, I assume.
Well, that's just normal voting. That's just normal. And to be fair, I wouldn't have expected the agencies to, you know, they would not really be in a position to vote for something that affects them to that degree. Well, they're being asked to do something, so they'd be voting for themselves. So that would be nonsensical. So I think it's quite reasonable that they've abstained. Okay, any further comments on that? No. Okay. So we will go then.
Sorry, Chair, just for the record, can you, just for Karen that's noting this, can you clarify the final vote again, please? How many for, how many against, and how many abstained?
5 voted in favour, 2 voted against, 7 abstentions.
Thank you.
Okay, so because we're running out of time and I've got a written update from Oz over citizen science, so I'll email that out to everyone so that we're all on the same page with that. There's some good stuff going on there, and congratulations to Friends of the Upper Wye for securing some funding. And Cardiff University did a forum recently, which was really brilliant, and there's so much interest in this yeah, so that's the citizen science is going very, very well indeed. So I'm going to move along now to updates in relation to the Flynn fee. I think we have now a conclusion to that. If we could just update the board.
Yeah, we issued a proactive press release in October to say that after review of the case file, we concluded that we would not be pursuing a case as we did not have enough evidence to conclusively identify a defendant. So, you know, as I'm sure you are aware, we have to demonstrate beyond reasonable doubt to the court that we have sufficient evidence, and as officers of the court, our lawyers have to be convinced that there's a reasonable chance of conviction or prospect of conviction when we take cases into court, and they weren't in this case. So we've had to drop that. But since then, we've reviewed the incident in more detail, and we've got a small task and finish group looking at the recommendations that have come out of that and how we implement them across Powys in particular.
Thank you. And do we have an update on Kingsland?
Yes.
Yeah, I could.
Oh, go on, Jenny.
Grace.
So
no, you do it, Grace.
Thanks. The update I've got is that the investigation into the complex case of from 2020 and December 2021 are ongoing.
Okay. Thank you. And now can we move to update on actions to deliver the nutrient management plan since the last meeting, YASC Foundation.
Right, my camera's gone for some reason. I apologise. It's broken. This meeting is too long. It's overworked itself. If it's okay, we're going to split. I'm going to split with Kate. Kate's going to deal with the stuff, the practice stuff, working with land managers. I will deal with the monitoring that's been going on and the work with the wetlands, but I will pass most of that over to Rachel. In terms of the monitoring, the sonde that we've had operational on the Ithon, we've matched the discharge from the flow gauging with the concentrations on the sonde to give us loads. We've taken off the load that's come from the predicted loads from Gothenburg predicted loads based on people within the catchment. We haven't taken industry out of this yet. There's a little bit more work to do, and we haven't taken CSO discharges out of this at the moment. But what we found is that the total phosphate is about 70%. Sorry, soluble reactive phosphate total phosphate is 92% not coming from the sewage works, and about 67% of the soluble reactive phosphate is apparently not coming from the sewage treatment works. The total amount of phosphate that we have recorded going past during the growing season is about just under 4 tonnes of total phosphate, of which 800 kilos was soluble reactive phosphate. The levels of soluble reactive phosphate are in line with NRW's measurements. What this shows is that if total phosphate has a role in driving the algal bloom, we haven't been necessarily looking at the right thing, but now we are starting to look at the right thing, and this data will move forward. There's a sonde installed and working on the Froome which the EA have funded, which will give us a similar analysis for the Froome. As I said, we still need to remove the CSO footprint. Dua Cymru's original estimation was it was about 3% of their total loading, but I've asked Fergus for that clarification. The papers that we've got out, the papers on eutrophication, certainly in the ones that are coming from America recently, are saying that total phosphate is a better proxy for eutrophication than soluble reactive phosphate. But we are talking about proxies here, and I've said this a number of times at the board, that ecology is the thing that we should be measuring here, not necessarily phosphate, and the ecology is in trouble. We've done some drone flyovers of the main stem to map the loss of ranunculus, about a 97% reduction. We are praying, and a part of this is, from our thinking, a part of this is the 4 big floods that came down in 2021, and they, in combination with the algal bloom, are the reason for the decline in this keystone habitat. We are working up on the mono system at the moment, a mechanism for natural capital investment in natural flood management that we will hope, if we can get it to work and we can get the legal certainty and we can get the other and get suitable payments to farmers, that we'll be able to translocate to the rest of the Y system and also to a certain extent to the us system. While we try to make that happen, we are praying that there are no big rainfall events in the rest of this winter and that we have a cloudy May. Sorry, there's a phone going off here. The other bit of news I'd just like to report is that we've been successful in an Ofwat Innovation Fund application for the River Usk, or rather the Rivers Trust have been successful, of which a large chunk of money is allocated to the Usk. I put forward to the board of the project that some of this money is used to support the ongoing citizen science in the Y, and they have been receptive, and I'm working up a proposal to submit to the board. This is 2.5 years worth of funding and includes funding for the analysis. The other thing that's happening at the moment is we're continuing to work up and design integrated wetlands for Herefordshire Council. As we go through this, you find just when you think you've got there, another snag arrives. Latest one is aperture over a bridge, but we will continue to work through them, and hopefully we'll get one to the point fairly soon. I will if possible, I'll bring Kate in at this point for the ongoing work with the supply chain, the water company and the farmers, and basically finding and developing workable solutions.
Okay, thanks, Simon. Kate.
Hi, Alyssa. We've obviously got multiple water quality type projects working with landowners, so I'm just going to pick and choose a few highlights of it. The Go Wild and the Curl project we've referred to in some of the TAG reports and elsewhere in the meeting. That's continuing for another year to try and work to maintain the 30% reduction of phosphate losses, because it takes ongoing work. That's really great that we've had an extension to that project. We've also got multiple projects running with retailer funding to work with their free range egg suppliers within the Y. Predominantly they're Noble suppliers at the moment, which is about 50 farms, and we're looking to extend that to Stonegate suppliers as well, so potentially another 50 farms. And I think we've engaged about 70% of the Noble sites so far and spent about 50k of grant from those retailers to deliver improvements to the infrastructure on those sites. We're waiting for some additional support or guidance from the regulatory bodies to enable us to secure some of the bigger investments that are required, which obviously farms are waiting to be told this is a legal requirement before spending lots of money. We've recently had the meetings with Refocus and a wider project meeting with all of the retailers and processes in the catchment in December, which I know some of you would have been to the catchment partnership meeting on the same day. So there's lots of work coming out with those businesses looking at how they can reduce their phosphate footprint obviously working with Avara on their proposals, with Cobagri and Gamba Logistics on the phosphate compliance tool that Martin referred to earlier, as well as some of the other businesses that may be sourcing livestock feed and other sources of phosphate into the catchment. Then obviously we've been working very closely with Martin, doing farmer meetings at the Green Man, trying to take some of those recommendations from Refocus now, working with Lancaster to secure another year's worth of funding for them to take some of their recommendations to field trials, looking at legacy phosphate as well. That's probably the highlights, really.
Thanks, Kate. That all sounds very positive and good. Thank you. Environment Agency.
Thanks, Alyssa. So it's great, so I'll take that one. So I've got 5 pieces to update the board. So positively, we do have some more dedicated resource and investment for the River Wye now, which is really good. So one of those is on people. So last time, I think Dave updated that DEFRA are funding 50 people across the EA for 18 months on agricultural diffuse issues. And we have a good share of that. So I can confirm that we've got 4 of those people for the River Wye. And that's in addition to the 2 people that we've got dedicated already. So those 4 extra people are in post and they're undertaking their training. And that extra resource will enable us to do about 400 inspections a year. So we should see more advice, guidance, compliance, and then regulation and enforcement if that's required. A second thing to update is that we've got more data and monitoring going on. So we've been successful in additional monitoring for the next financial year, so 22-23. So we've secured 10 real-time water quality monitoring devices, so SONs, to improve our network. And we've got more drones for satellite images of diffuse pollution as well. So that, in addition to all the other data, and particularly the citizen science data, will be really beneficial. I think I just want to point out that those 2 pieces, we are going to need time for them to be in place and evaluate their effectiveness and how much of a difference they will make. The third piece is for awareness for the board. We've got an upcoming visit from 2 Environment Agency exec directors. So they're the level below the chief exec, and hopefully also Minister Powell on the 10th and 11th of February. And that's to show the local impacts and hear from local stakeholders to a national and a local issue, and so that they can better understand it and that we can ask them for help. So I'll feed back to the board at the next meeting on the highlights and the actions that have come from that. 4th piece is that on the dashboard, Jenny has updated it so that it's got all the different organisations' data for 2020. And personally, I'm pleased about this because it's really good to show the data and information that we have available so that it's more transparent. And then the 5th and final thing is a bit, I suppose, of a personal one, but to say that I am really looking forward to working with you all on this. And I do hear and understand about the long-running issues and the complexity of this. And I very much appreciate that I'm new, and I don't want there to be a drop in momentum between Dave and me. So I'm working as best I can to get up to speed, review where we're at and where we're going. But I do feel like there's good momentum and engagement in place, and I'm looking forward to working with you all on that. Thanks, Alyssa.
Thanks, Grace. That's brilliant. One thing that I had a note to ask about, it, and you might not, but this is sort of something to be aware of, is that we have a discrepancy in targets in the lower Y. Subsequent to NRW changing, so now the lower Y fails if you are on the Welsh side of it, but it doesn't on the English side, which is very confusing. And the EA, we're going to revise the targets. We'll have a look.
So I know that we're in negotiations with Natural England about that. So I don't know, Claire, if you wanted to pick that one up.
Yes,
No.
yeah, I can update on that. So I updated the board at the last meeting with the indicative changes of the targets. I can't give you an update on what the target's going to be. What I can do is provide a timescale. So we are committed to providing the board with that information of the outcome of that target assessment by the end of February.
Okay, good. That's great. Thanks.
I'm aware it feels like it's taken a long time, but just ensuring we get the evidence right, and especially for EA, going through the implications of that. So thank you for bearing with us. But
no, that's fine. But that's great. It's good to know what the time thing is on that. Marvelous. So actually, it's now your turn for an update. Woohoo!
Yes. So so I wanted to update. Obviously, as I've explained before, Natural England has a number of roles. So obviously, ongoing work in our statutory consultation role in terms of planning, but wanted to give further updates around our role in providing advice, farmer advice. Do a lot of this through our catchment sensitive farming role, and like the EA, we have had some very, very welcome additional resource. So we've got about 6 new catchment sensitive farming posts. We've recruited those now. They're all due to start around February. Obviously, they need a chance to get up to speed with their training and development, but it is more boots on the ground, being able to go and deliver that carrot part of the jigsaw in terms of being able to give that advice, and also being able to utilise contracted specialist advice for all those farmers who need it as well. So that's really good news. We continue to work really, really closely with YNUS and other partners in terms of making sure we're all aligned in terms of that advice we're giving, and obviously working very closely with the Environment Agency and their field officers in terms of that their role around enforcement and regulation. So that's really welcome. The other area in Natural England, obviously, we've very much got our eyes on is, as I described before, DEFRA's new agri-environment scheme. We're very closely involved in the technical advice around that. So as well as ensuring that we're inputting to that scheme development in terms of ensuring it will deliver in the future for that, we're beginning now to obviously talk to farmers and think through about what that will look like, especially in a couple of years' time, when some of the really significant areas like landscape recovery projects, and I was just thinking Martin Williams is, 250 farmers, it's big landscape recovery like that the new scheme can really, really look to engage and develop. So that big recovery scheme is anywhere between 500 and 5,000 hectares. So it's that kind of land use significant change that is going to make a difference on the River Wye. So really looking forward to continuing to develop our thinking and working, and just doing the very initial groundwork at the moment about raising that awareness. But the appetite is significant, and partnerships like that only work with collaboration. So it will be about us all working together in terms of kind of collaborating to make those big scale changes happening. And then the other significant element from the environment bill is obviously the local nature recovery strategy. So again, we're just looking at our role, warming up in terms of conversations with local authorities and responsible authorities, but we will have those local nature strategies being developed again, which for Herefordshire, the why and the issues and the actions we need to deliver will have to be fundamentally a significant part of that local nature recovery strategy. So that's where we're focusing some of our effort there.
Great, thank you. David, an update from NRW?
There's probably 7 highlights that I'll quickly go through. We're on the point of publishing the SAC compliance assessments for other water quality determinants for the 9 SACs, including the Wye in Wales. We're in the process of procuring a number of continuous monitoring devices, so SONs in effect, which is similar to Grace, and they'll be also picking up chlorophyll, is my understanding, so to provide additional long-term water quality data. We've procured a number of handheld phosphate meters, which are going to go into the environment teams to help us identify potential sources of phosphate. We're developing a program to monitor diatoms and invertebrates to again investigate the impacted elevating nutrients and the effect that they're having on the ecology. So there's quite a bit of stuff there. We're developing, a lot of our additional monitoring proposals are very much targeted at the Wye SAC in particular. I think Anne last time mentioned the Wye SAC officer, and that unfortunately that person's left. So we've re-advertised, and that post has been shortlisted for interviews next week. We've we've looked at the tag action plan and done, I think, what was mentioned in the chat, who, what, when for NRW. So we'll be able to feed back into each action plan meeting with progress on our actions. So there'll be a sort of, again, time frame chronology of what we've been able to deliver. And then operationally, everybody who's aware of the bird flu outbreak. So a lot of the resource that we've targeted at permitted chicken units, we've moved on to some of the pig units on the Y, rider, some on the lug in particular. So we've been looking at that. I mentioned AFA earlier on. And we're doing a much closer look at our biosolids deployments and land spreading in the catchment in particular, particularly around closeness to watercourses and application rates. And I've got the update. So what Anna suggested is that I'll send it through to Jane Little and we can send it out to members.
That'd be great.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Fabulous. Thanks a lot, Dave. That's great. I think Fergus has left the call. Is he?
No,
He's still,
no,
he's still with us. Marvellous.
That was just a sneeze.
Oh, bless you.
Thank you very much. Very quick. I've just got 3 very quick slides. I'm just going to show you. One is just to explain that when we're doing our modeling, what we're doing here, what we're doing with our modeling is part of a process aimed at securing investment and then delivering improvements over a wider scale. So that's the process we normally go through. So just so everybody knows that there is an endpoint in the modeling we're doing that does feed in. We feed this information into others, but the endpoint is in Wales is the Natural Environment Programme, in England, the WINEP, Water Industry National Environment Programme, which then feeds into our business planning and funding. This is the next slide, just very quickly an update. The modeling we are about to feed our proposed solutions. So these are just refining the solutions we've already got into NRW. That should be there with them. In fact, it's if it doesn't get down to them this week, it will be with them at the beginning of next week. But I think we've just about provided that for them. And then just very finally, I haven't talked too much about this, but this is the investment program that we've got in the Y. So this is on top of the sites where we've already got phosphorus removal, and the current status is that they're at. Now we've accelerated work on both wells, sewage works. We're trying to bring that in early, and that would introduce for the first time a phosphorus limit on that. Hereford 9, just be aware that some of these numbers will change over time as we get closer. Hereford 9 is, and rather was that sort of combined scheme, is more likely to be around 25 million to complete that scheme. But that one scheme alone is going to deliver the largest individual change that we'll make. And then all these other schemes are all in progress, as you can see, with the latest delivery date being 31st of March 2025. So that's just our current program, and that's what we're working through. Total program value is just shy of 60 million at the moment, so it's gone up a bit from where we were originally. That's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you. That's very good. Thanks, Fergus. Local planning authorities, Herefordshire. Phil.
Thanks, Chair.
Rachel, right.
So yeah, I'll take this.
Okay.
I'll speak about wetlands, and then I want to hand over to Liz Jubilee on the planning SPD. And she will provide an update on that. We continue since the last board meeting to seek to purchase further sites for integrated wetlands. I want to say, for the benefit of people that are watching this and for those also in the room, integrated wetlands will not address the underlying pollution issue in the River Wye. They are purely about creating development headroom. And that's the intention of it. We have a planning application in for the first site at Luston. We believe that is close to determination now. We continue to monitor that closely. As colleagues from WWOOF said, there are some further details we need to sort out. We have had some really constructive support from Welsh Water colleagues because we are receiving water from them and putting it into a wetland. We still some detail to tie down, but there's been some really hard work within Welsh Water to help us with this that I want to thank colleagues from Welsh Water for. We continue to discuss with Natural England how those credits will apply within the catchment when they become available. And we continue to discuss with the Environment Agency the permitting arrangements that will apply. But we've been making good progress on both of those areas. So I think developers in particular will be interested in what happens next, as will Herefordshire Cabinet and Herefordshire elected members. We might expect to see a report to Herefordshire Cabinet that works through the process of nutrient certainty. These are the things that we have in place as a competent authority to assure ourselves that we've reached a point of nutrient certainty. And Cabinet will want to look very, very closely in that before we make a decision. And it's our intention to run it through Richard Kimbling QC, who's been providing advice all the way in terms of supporting Herefordshire on this. Cabinet will then want to consider how those credits might be applied. And there will be some limits in terms of the catchment map that we're agreeing with Natural England. And we're going through the final validation stages of how many credits the first site will release with WWF, who've had somebody have an independent look at this. But we anticipate that the first tranche will release about sufficient credits for 600 homes. Cabinet will want to consider how those credits are actually allocated, and we're working through that particular process at the moment on an interim basis. And then we've commissioned Ricardo to do a wider piece of work on what a long-term credit application policy would look like. And part of that work will include a stakeholder consultation. So those are the two things that we might anticipate Cabinet being asked to consider. I've promised that credits will be available within H1 this year. We are still on target to do that. We have constructors lined up, ready to start work on our first site. As soon as the deals are completed and the planning application is approved or resolved one way or the other. I don't want to anticipate the planning authority. And we have further sites that we are hopeful of being able to purchase that will sort out other parts of the catchment area. So a lot of progress being made. I want to offer some assurances as well that development management colleagues are working through the process needed to allocate those credits and setting up systems and resource for that. We are finalising the cost of credits and how much developers will need to pay to access credits. That work continues and it is at the stage of final validation. So a lot of things falling into place in terms of the wetlands. I've probably said enough there, but I know that one or two developers will probably want to come back to me outside of the meeting. We're committed to doing a developer update in February of this year ahead of any Cabinet report. If I may now, I would like to hand over to Liz Jubilee, who will update on the agricultural SPD.
Thanks, Rachel. Just a very brief update on the agricultural SPD then. So this is guidance that's being prepared by the forward plans team internally, and just to let you know that there is a section on there within the SPD on phosphorus and nutrient loads of agricultural development, and that particular piece is being developed by our consultants Ricardo in collaboration with Natural England, who are feeding into the process as well. So the 6-week consultation period is due to commence in early March, And if we meet all the timetable targets, then the SPD will be adopted in late April, early May. And that's all from me. Thank you.
Thanks, Liz. Paris, Peter Morris.
Yeah, quick updates from me from the planning side. Obviously, we're applying NRW's planning advice, so no different to anybody else or the other planning authorities in the meeting. We're waiting for that to be updated at any moment. That's something David didn't mention. I think we're seeing NRW's advice to be updated shortly, which will clarify which types of development the phosphate and the SAC issues apply to, and appropriate assessment applies to. I think from my side, probably the biggest effort that I'm involved in at the moment is Cross Wales. We've certainly got meetings, which I'm chairing a group at the moment of other planning authorities across Wales. So because there's 9 SACs across Wales, I'm sort of pulled in that direction very much as well. So we're trying to coordinate and collaborate across Wales on this. I think one of the big things there is the beginnings of setting up nutrient management boards for the other river catchments as well in Wales. So we will begin to see that happen. They're really at sort of governance stage at the moment, leads being identified for each of those boards. So, and lessons from this board will be applied and used in the setting up of those other boards. So that's happening. I think I'm also wanting, I was listening earlier around some of the solutions for development. That's something I think we've really got to work further on. So yes, wetlands in Herefordshire looking possible. There's other work across Wales looking at wetlands too. So again, there's some sharing and learning opportunities there. What I would like to almost see is a menu approach available to development. So we've got various options that development could look at. So I'm looking at that very much with my planning hat on as a planning authority. There is also a Welsh Government oversight group that's been set up. I don't know if I've mentioned that before. It's only met, I think, 2 or 3 times to date. So there's some support being made available there as well to help us. I think from a sort of Paris perspective, there's other initiatives going on. I think the Housing Authority have appointed some consultants to support how the council might bring forward council housing. So again, they're looking for solutions around this. So there's various activities going on, but probably for me, myself, the biggest pull at the moment is probably elsewhere across Wales, trying to sort out and assist there. Okay. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thanks, Peter. Monmouthshire, anyone on the call from Monmouthshire? I think you had to leave. Forest of Dean, don't know if we've had anyone on from Forest of Dean. Brecon Beacons.
Alyssa, we don't have an officer present.
No, are you aware of anything specific to?
Three things I would mention. It's not too late for those that haven't to respond to the consultation draft of the National Park Management Plan, Future Beacons, which is heavy on the phosphate issue, amongst others. So please do if you haven't already. I believe that our new Chief Executive, Catherine Milling-Jones, is going to set up the USC Nutrient Management Board. And as far as I'm aware, Fergus, please correct me if I'm wrong, we're still awaiting the source apportionment from De Cymru for the USC. Yes. Eagerly awaited, Fergus, just to give you a nudge. And my final point is that we have commented on a planning application under Powys County Council's jurisdiction for a new IPU that looks as if it will be reliant upon conditions for the export of manure to an AD plant within the national park, which will then spread the digestate, it would appear, potentially within the national park. So that is a matter of concern. And I personally have raised those concerns at the authority's planning committee and with the chairman of our planning committee.
Okay, thanks, James. Martin Williams, NFU.
Hi. Well, what have we done? From starting out where I came from in our little group, it's sort of grown like Topsy. I've been working hard with Kate. We've been in discussion, as Kate said, with Gamba, Cobb, Avara. We've engaged with the farmer element, and we've got a huge amount of traction in that direction, which is great, which I think has been lacking perhaps up until now. We're, as I said, looking at nitrogen and phosphate monitoring. We've got an EA meeting next month. I think Alyssa's aware of that, and Grace, and hopefully we can have some more discussion around farmer activity on that. There are so far 250 farmers engaged with the Cobb project. Kate and I have spoken about moving that to all fertilizer suppliers and trying to get some code of conduct around the catchment based on inputs. The NFU, which I'm representing today, are on board and happy to support what we're doing. But I think from a farming aspect, the engagement is absolutely the key, engagement in education or re-education, and we're trying to find positive moves forward. And I think that will come. I know it sounds a bit woolly and it sounds a bit airy-fairy and magazine, but it's a long game. And I think with the impetus we've got now, if we keep that going, I'm sure we can come to a good result.
Thanks, Martin, and you are to be congratulated for the energy that you're bringing to this and the increasing engagement. It's really heartening to see.
Thank you.
Don't think it's not, that we don't recognise it, and it's good for you. Well done. HCILG, Mary, all right. Have you got any updates or?
I'll be really quick because I feel a bit embarrassed because you've all been busy working and I've been busy bothering all of you. So it's only because I can't work, not because I don't want to. We've met a few times as a group. We obviously represent quite a large sector now, so there's more and more people joining. And I presume that will only keep growing because obviously the moratorium is still at the point where you can't process an application. So every time somebody makes a plan application, there's more people to join the group. We've continued to lobby the government and MPs. Jim just did point out that we might need to change the name on the Prime Minister's letter that we've drafted in case there's a big change afoot there. So we'll hold it for a few days and just make sure we've addressed it to the right person. In the meantime, I've been attending every meeting, seminar, presentation, anything to do with the river or a catchment. I'm basically available for hire. If you've got a meeting about the river and you need to fill a room, I can do that. I keep meeting Jenny in dark corners of random pubs, back rooms of random pubs when we're listening to presentations. But yeah, obviously we're just eagerly awaiting the wetland situation, and the trading platform would be a big help. But coming back to my point, there are people doing quite a lot of things around private delivery, just in the sense of that we're not shirking from the sense that we could do something. It's just very difficult. If you don't own land and you don't own a sewage treatment plant, then your options for private betterment are limited, which is why it's really great to see that Fergus has accelerated some of the improvement programs and the amount of funding has been extended. So thank you, Welsh Water. It's not gone unnoticed, and the development sector wider are grateful that it's you guys doing it for us. And I think, apart from other questions that I'll send to people that have arisen after the meeting, I think that's it, unless Jim can remember something. We're a bit worried about the fact that the catchment is being, kind of the lug part of the catchment has been divorced from the wider catchment, and whether that is actually a legal footing. Obviously, as you all know, Jim and I are very cautious about raising it as a problem because it causes us a huge problem. But it just seems that, again, in terms of planning, we need to know if that's something that's coming forward. I get the sense that it is, but I would again make a plea for forward notice of big changes that might make somebody go bankrupt, or might mean they're not able to provide a home for the family they promised, or whatever it might be. Please don't do the overnight thing again. If the whole catchment has to be treated the same, just be, that's fine. We'll have to take it and address it when it comes. But I am worried that the lug has been treated separately, and that some of the measures being discussed are nothing to do with the lug. So if the lug is the problem, all the actions and the money should be spent in the lug, or above the lug, obviously. That would be great. And you'd be disappointed if I didn't ask, can housing be separated from agriculture in a plan so that we have our own trajectory of delivery? Because I'm pretty sure, unless the fair share thing has been reviewed, Claire, and it's now that housing have to provide all the betterment, I think housing is on a really good footing now that we've got the wetland, we've got private delivery, we've got Welsh Water overspending and accelerating delivery. We're not the problem, and we've fixed our bit. So I would like to obviously give my annual plea for some sort of relief going forward. But Jim, if I've forgotten something, step in now.
No, thanks, Mary. Right, so I'm going to move on to public questions. We have people now dropping off the call because we've overrun, but as usual. So yeah, public questions. Tom Tibbets.
Thank you, Chair. Couple of questions. Firstly, to Simon Evans. Thank you for your report, Simon. Deeply worrying that you mention ranunculus and 97% reduction. I mean, that makes me feel quite sick, quite frankly. But you also said that ecology should be being measured. Here at Friends of the Upper Wye, we're constantly reviewing what we're doing and trying to get the best bang for our extremely limited funds that all of us volunteers who are completely unpaid for any of this work we're doing are trying to do. So would you advise that we start to take seriously the question of either figuring out how can we do ecology measurements, or indeed how can we do total phosphate measurements? Because as you're probably fully aware, we currently only measure SRP, orthophosphate. That's my first question.
Hi, Tom. Yep, and this is something that I'm trying to tease out in my own head as I draw up the budgets for this Ofwat project, is how we get the best bang from the buck. So I'm sorry to not give you an answer now, but can you watch this space? Because the SAC will be in good condition or not in good condition on the basis of the species that it's notified for. And they're not always the easiest things to measure. So I'm just in the process of teasing out how we bring citizen science best to this, in terms of, is it continuing to measure phosphate, and if we can get a direct parallel between phosphate and total phosphate, is it increasing the sediment stuff, is it doing some of the ecological assays? But apologies, Tom, I'm going to have to say watch this space, and I'll be in touch with you in a couple of weeks.
No, that's fine, Simon. I just wanted to make it abundantly aware to everybody that we're willing to talk to anyone like yourselves and try and figure out how best we can deploy ourselves for the benefit of you and the river. Second point I wanted to make was, I also echo Alyssa's comments to Martin. It's great to see real and genuine engagement from the farming community, and I do not want to give the impression that the citizen science teams up and down the catchment are in any way against farming or against farmers. We're all in the same boat, we're all living here, we're all in the same community, and we're all really desperate to see the situation improve. So thank you very much for the energy and enthusiasm you bring to this. And my third question is a technical question to our friends at Natural Resources Wales. And I'm not sure if you'll be able to answer this directly, Dave, or if it's a question that will have to go somewhere else. But in the compliance assessment of Welsh SACs against phosphorus targets that was published by Natural Resources Wales and was part of the documentation submitted to the Environmental Audit Committee, you referenced on page 69 both the load apportionment model by Bowles or Bowes et al. 2008. That is a paper I'm able to access. But there's a second reference which refers to the revised SAGIS modelling, or the SAGIS modelling, which was done in as the reference puts it, previous work by Atkins and APEM 2018. That reference, that bit of information, that report or whatever it is not available, or at least it certainly isn't available for me on the internet to look up. And I would quite like to have sight of it, because the particular paragraph of this report that I'm looking at is heavily relied upon by NFU in the Environmental Audit Committee to say that there isn't a link, and NRW has said that there isn't a link between poultry units or intensive animal agriculture and nutrient failures on the Y. And being of a scientific background, I was quite keen to work out exactly how those conclusions were drawn. So if someone from NRW could promise to send me that reference,
yeah,
I would be
I'll get to
delighted.
it, Tom.
Thank you very much. For the time being, that's all. There's plenty of other public people who want to speak as well. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Tom. Christine Hugh-Jones.
Hello, and thank you everybody for the things that have gone on so far. I would just like to say that as far as I know, I'm the only representative of an NGO entirely placed in Wales at this meeting. And I would really like to express my sort of disappointment at feeling that I come from a comparatively third world country. If we first look at Martin Williams's comments about the 250 strong farming community who have got together to try and address the problem in Herefordshire, where is the equivalent in Wales? If we look at NRW, who have given us a nice list of things they're doing to look at the problem in David Lee's account, I would like to know what difference is this going to make? How is any evidence that they acquire going to be applied? Because we do not see any enforcement, any effective enforcement in Wales. If we turn to the planning department, we see that the Environmental Audit Committee's report recommended a moratorium on poultry farming in the Y catchment until, presumably we know more about the impacts. We don't pass any more applications. At the moment in Powys planning alone, this doesn't include the Brecon Beacon National Park or whatever might be happening in Monmouthshire, and we have nobody from Monmouthshire to speak to us, I note. There are about 1 million chickens in the planning system. And Peter Morris very carefully said that the planning department relies on planning advice from Natural Resources Wales. So in fact, Natural Resources Wales ends up in a position after a bit of argy-barging and more information and so on, invariably in saying that they are quite happy about poultry units being passed, provided there are planning conditions to control the manure management, etc. But we all know that nobody enforces those conditions, and indeed Powys says it's not its responsibility to monitor them. And it would enforce them if the public raised a problem. But how can the public go onto a farm and review the manure management plan? That is clearly ridiculous. If we then turn to James Marsden's example of an IPU where the manure will be exported to a digester, a particular digester, if I've got the right application in mind, and I won't mention any names, this is a doubling of a unit for a large broiler shed. And the manure from the previous application is being spread in the US catchment. And this just brings up the whole question of how there is any sort of audit trail of where all these substances go. I just put that before you. I feel very sad for Wales.
Thanks, Christine. I mean, the manure management plans are something that I think the board might usefully look at. Whether how are they enforced and what use are they? David, have you got any comments that you'd like to make regarding Christine's points?
I think he's left the meeting, Alyssa.
Has he? Right.
I simply say, if I may, that some of the evidence of where the digestate is being spread is in the public domain. I could circulate a link if that would be helpful.
Yeah, that would be. Thank you. Thanks, Christine. Helen.
Thank you. A couple of questions. One for Rachel Joy, please. She said in her presentation, which was some really very positive stuff in there, but one of the comments was that the wetlands were purely about creating nutrient neutrality and allowing development, but actually those wetlands were put into the nutrient management plan. And I did raise concerns about that because of the way that they were being carved up. How are they now being removed from the manure management plan and and now strictly identified as a means of delivering development? And I've got another question about planning, but which probably is addressed to all the planning authorities. Do you want me to ask that now, or? Okay, so it's good to see that Herefordshire Council is producing an SBD on agricultural development. But one of the issues that we're seeing, and this goes back to right at the beginning of this meeting where we were talking about livestock numbers in the catchment, it is the amount of unauthorised livestock development that goes on. In particular, and I know Dave Lee described this at one of the earlier meetings as pigs by stealth, but the conversion of existing buildings to pig units, which obviously have the potential for both air quality and soil water pollution impacts. There is a big problem on both sides of the border of cases where these matters have been drawn to the attention of the planning authorities, and they've shown absolutely no interest in taking enforcement action, even where they should be subject to SAC and usually environmental impact assessment as well. Can the planning authorities have a look at this, please?
Thanks, Anne. Rachel? Hello. Somebody can make a response about planning enforcement of
on the wetlands, Helen, they were going to, there's a percentage that was still allocated to ecological betterment only, but Kate, I think Simon's gone, but Kate might know, but as far as I know, that the calculations were done with a kind of a siphoned off percentage for ecological betterment, which means they could stay in the plan. But yeah, it'd be very interesting if
that was
not the case.
that was what
I don't think that's changed. I think the point that Rachel was making is that they're not a magic bullet to fix the problem. But there is betterment. Yeah.
You need an agricultural action. The wetlands themselves, even if you had 20, 30 wetlands, they wouldn't ever be enough.
My issue was always about how you can put something into the plan and then take a bit of it out. That was always the issue. You know, at what point is it compensation or mitigation?
Okay. Well, I don't know what's happened to Rachel. Maybe her.
That is my understanding as well. That
yeah,
I understand it would be a condition of Natural England's support for those wetlands to maintain a proportion of betterment for the river. There would certainly be WAF's ambition for it.
It's also been our sort of one of the conditions for us to be, to be as supportive as we are. We want to see betterment of the river too.
So I think it's just that she just expressed that differently, and I wouldn't worry about that.
Sorry, Chair, did I miss my name being mentioned?
You did. You missed your moment there.
My dog needed a comfort break. I'm so sorry.
My dog was about to explode. Helen was asking for clarification as to the wetlands with respect to betterment to the river, and not simply mitigation for development.
Yeah, to confirm, 20% of any phosphate reduction is being reserved for betterment, and I stress betterment.
Okay, and the other was a question around lack of enforcement for unauthorized livestock, but I don't think there's anyone really on the call who want to take that, but we hear what you're saying. Andrew.
Melissa, sorry, can I just jump in on that one? I'm not sure, because I've not looked to see whether or not it's been published on the Brecon Beacons website, but we have now developed a planning protocol for new agricultural buildings, all of them, which involves much more rigorous screening of, for example, an application that says new agricultural building without specifying whether it's going to be used for livestock.
Could you share that, James?
I will dig it out and I will send it to you, Alyssa, for sharing more widely. But yeah, the protocol exists and is being applied in the national park.
Thanks, that's great. Andrew McRobb.
Hi, thanks, Alyssa. I first want to say we've had some great information this afternoon, and some of it dire and some of it quite good. I thought that Christine made a very valid plea for Wales, and I support that. But I'd like to pick up a bit on one of the things Tom said, and just to expand on citizen science. And I'd like to actually put before those that are still here the opportunity. We now have in citizen scientists probably between 800 and 1,000 volunteers within the Y catchment, all of whom want to help. Our deployment so far has been mainly self-motivated, and we've followed, the gut principle. But in a world with reduced budgets for formal agencies, how can this resource be better used? And I would follow up on Tom's point about, is there more we can do? Can we do more from an ecological point of view? Can we do more from, at a meeting with NRW recently, they said photographs of parts of a river taken maybe once a week or once a month for a year would give them great help. So I really want to try and finish, we're getting to the back of the meeting on a positive note. Why can't the volunteers be trained and used across the whole catchment, possibly as even first responders? Now, the original, for instance, the original point was, oh, well, you're not qualified. No, but paramedics are volunteers, community police officer volunteers. Why can't we have formal training, and why can't we use this fantastic resource that's coming forward free of charge to actually benefit the whole of the Y catchment? And that's really just where I'd like to say, because there is precedent for this, and Rivers Trust have told us that that's happening in the West Country and it's happening in London. So rather than look at reasons why this can't happen, could I ask all the agencies to look at how this can happen and what's needed, and use this fantastic resource? Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Andrew. And yeah, I mean, absolutely, I'll add my voice to that. The numbers of people who are stepping up to help the river is wonderful. It's really inspiring, because we love it, and it's a great thing. So thanks. So the last word, I think, is going to go to Tom Tibbets.
Right. Yeah, well, brilliant. Well said, Andrew. I quite agree. And I would add actually one layer to that, which was we heard today from NRW that they were not able to take any further action about the Llanvi incident in July 2021 because of insufficient evidence. And I don't need to remind this meeting that they were not able to supply an investigative officer to that site until 13 hours after the reported incident was received at the NRW control room. And so you know, if there were on the ground volunteers such as myself and the wonderful teams that we've put together, who are able to take water samples, take photographs, do whatever might be necessary to really beef up the evidence which the agencies are able to then rely upon to secure convictions and proper enforcement of egregious breakages of the law. That, I think, would be a rather sensible move. But my actual question was actually something that Martin Williams mentioned more than once in his various contributions to the meeting, which was, we need more enforcement, and how can we get the requisite budget for adequate enforcement of the voluntary farming rules? And this is something that Martin said himself. I'm delighted to hear him say it, but my understanding is that you're likely to be visited as a farmer once in 253 years and have an environmental inspection of your operation. So there clearly isn't a great deal of enforcement going on at the moment. And I dare say that other than not voting Conservative at the next election, I'm not really sure of many ways that we could change that, but I would be delighted to hear from anyone on the Nutrient Management Board how we might further improve the budgets available for enforcement, so that those very small minority of farmers that really are getting things quite badly wrong at the moment are given the opportunity to be shown how to do it better.
Thanks, Tom. Yeah, I mean, I think we did hear that they have additional 4 people, which is more than they had. So I think we probably will start to see more activity, but whether that is going to sort of stall at the bit of advice and all the rest of it, or whether it would go straight through, you know, and we're ever going to get a prosecution, I don't know. There are many obstacles, I think, in the way. But yeah, I think it's frustrating for farmers like Martin, just as it is for people who rely on the statutory agencies to be enforcers. So, right, okay, thank you for your questions and for your input there. Days for the next meeting, I don't know. I think probably I'm going to go with March because it will fit after the, hopefully, getting the update on the targets, that piece of news, so that would fit in there. And yeah, and any suggestions for the agenda, gratefully received. I've got a few things that I'm considering, including manure management plans and potentially asking River Action to come and talk to the board. So there we go. So we'll leave it there. Thank you all very much for your attendance and your patience. And I hope all the dogs have not spilled on the kitchen floor. And I'll see you at the next board meeting. Thanks.
Thanks, Liz.